across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell. The latest on Ann Widdecombe's murder is coming up. We'll get reaction from a former Cabinet Minister, still an MP, Sir Gavin Williamson. We'll also talk about why £10 billion of unusable PPE was purchased by you, the taxpayer, during the COVID lockdowns. Also, 500,000 people say they don't want to have the licence fee any longer. We'll talk about the Hillsborough Law, which is being approved this evening as well, a duty of candour even for spies. We'll talk as well about a centrist Tory, Lord Barwell, Gavin Barwell, former Chief of Staff to Theresa May, who's been purged by Kemi Badenoch. We'll talk about why Scott Mills was the highest paid BBC star before he was sacked, and the Killjoy Council tearing down an England flag on the eve of the semi-final of the World Cup, which is happening, well, one of them's tonight, of course, but tomorrow night between England and, indeed, Argentina. We'll also have an update, as promised, on Ann Widdecombe's cat. The short answer is everything is fine, but I'll give you all the details in the next few minutes after I've spoken to Sir Gavin Williamson. As always, lots to talk about this evening between now and 10 o'clock. I'd love to hear from you. Whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter or at Cardwell Peter on Instagram. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp voice note as well, or you can give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss here in the Evening Exchange between now and 10 o'clock with me, Peter Cardwell. Stay with us. So, over the last few days since the dreadful murder of Ann Widdecombe, we have heard various contradictory things from the police. They say don't speculate, but we've heard at the start that they had no evidence of a terror link. Then we were told there was no evidence of a political link or a politically targeted assassination. But then today, from the counter-terror police, indeed from the Assistant Chief Constable of the Metropolitan Police, this is what we heard.
Counter-terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Ann Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack.
So now the Assistant Chief Constable of the Metropolitan Police, who's head of counter-terror in this country, Lawrence Taylor, he says a targeted attack. Let's hear what the Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall says about her forces, or the force she holds to account, about their handling of this, because there have been many criticisms. Let's hear what Alison Hernandez, the Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall, has to say.
There's been quite a bit of commentary about the way that Devon and Cornwall Police have communicated during the early stages of this case. But as the Home Secretary said yesterday, it is not unusual that in a fast-paced investigation, more information comes to light and changes the nature or the character of what the police are dealing with. Since beginning the investigation, I've been briefed by the Chief Constable regularly, and I'm confident that Devon and Cornwall Police has provided a substantial and professional response to Ann Widdecombe's death.
We'll talk about quite a number of other political issues as well with Sir Gavin Williamson, who's with us now, the Conservative MP, former Cabinet Minister. Gavin, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Gavin, do you think that there was a substantial and professional approach from Devon and Cornwall Police? Because the story has changed, and of course so many people, and you will have known Ann Widdecombe personally, so many people just want justice here. We're being told not to speculate, and we're trying not to do that, but at the same time the information we're getting keeps changing.
I think what really needed to happen was making sure that there was no real comment until there's a real grip on the facts of the case. And I think Devon and Cornwall maybe too quickly rushed out information that proved not to be accurate, and that isn't helpful for anyone at all. The real focus is on finding the killer, which action seems to someone has already been detained, and for the police to build a case and make sure justice is delivered, because it's such a tragic incident and such a lovely lady that has had her life cut short.
Do you worry about your own personal safety? You've been a Cabinet Minister. In fact, you've had 24-hour security as Defence Secretary. And since then, of course, like many MPs, that's no longer with you. I just wonder how you deal with your own personal safety and whether you agree with the survey that's done today by YouGov, saying that 64% of British people now say that MPs face at least a fair amount of risk to their personal safety.
The sad reality is you do face people sending death threats. They're usually keyboard warriors, but like most MPs, I've had a stalker. I've had people sort of make threats to me. But what's so important to most MPs is that you're available for the communities that you represent. And I feel as if I've always been very fortunate representing my seat in Staffordshire. People have always been incredibly welcoming, supportive, and very, very kind. But it's so tragic when you see incidents like this, because you do realise that some people do get scared by that, and maybe it makes politics more distant. But I hope that isn't the case.
The person who's Defence Secretary obviously has numerous threats to them, and it's really important that that person is protected. When you hear about proposals or suggestions that MPs, any MP, a backbench MP or whoever, gets either that level of protection, which is of course very expensive and resource intensive, or some level of further protection, what is your view on that, having lived under that and dealt with that, and those brave and very good officers of the Royalty and Specialist Protection Branch of the Metropolitan Police?
Well, I was very privileged to have some brilliant Metropolitan Police officers who were incredibly supportive, worked incredibly hard, as well as Staffordshire Police as well. But I don't think that's going to be practical to apply to every single Member of Parliament. We already have security at our homes, which is very much welcomed. They issue you with special fobs that you can press in order to make sure that people are aware that there is a challenge there. So I think the security offered to members of Parliament has improved leaps and bounds since the tragic killing of both Joe Cox and David Amos. And a lot of work has been done. I recognise this always needs to be kept under review. But as a Member of Parliament, if I can avoid the situation of having lots of police officers around me, I want to be available to my constituents. I want them to feel comfortable to approach me and talk to me in the street.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the great things about British democracy. It's that availability of MPs.
Sure, I totally agree with you. We've talked about the time you're Defence Secretary. Let's talk about the time you're Education Secretary, because we've had this report that's saying that Boris Johnson's government wasted £10 billion of taxpayers' money on unusable PPE. That's what the COVID inquiry has found. Are you surprised by that? Why was so much money wasted, do you think?
So I was surprised to hear the scale of this, and this is the important part of the inquiry, to make sure that there are lessons learned. Was the NHS properly prepared in terms of a provision of PPE beforehand? What seems to be the indicator is that it didn't have those supplies in place. That's why we were in a place where PPE was purchased that wasn't actually right and wasn't correct for the circumstances. But the key thing is from learning from those mistakes and making sure, God forbid, that we're ever in a situation like that again, that any mistakes that were made weren't repeated.
Do you think Matt Hancock or Boris Johnson should apologise?
Well, I know as a minister in that time, you know, there's certain things that I got wrong as Education Secretary, and I apologised for that. And I know the then Prime Minister has also, where things went wrong, has made an apology. But we mustn't forget the unique, truly unique circumstances that we're all dealing with. And there was a desperate need for more PPE. And of course, where mistakes have been made, obviously we want to make sure those aren't repeated in the future. But if someone's done something wrong, I always think it's probably best to own up to it, apologise for it. As I say, that was my approach when I got things wrong, and I think that's probably the most honest way of going forward.
Speaking of a duty of candour, that's something that we've been talking about quite a lot in regard to the long-delayed Hillsborough Law. That is something which is set to be approved. Andy Burnham has been speaking his sort of maiden speech. Obviously, he's been an MP in the past, but the first time I think he's spoken in Parliament, apart from to have his oath of allegiance. That's something that he has been proposing for a long time. 97 lives were claimed after a crush during the FA Cup, I should say, semi-final between Liverpool and Nottingham Forest at Sheffield Wednesday's ground. Let's hear just a little bit about what Andy Burnham, the MP for Makerfield, the next Prime Minister, now confirmed, has to say about this, and then we'll get Sir Gavin's reaction. Let's hear from Andy Burnham.
Let's finish where I started, that the Liverpool supporters were blamed for harming their own fellow supporters at a football match. That is what was done. That was left to stand for all of those years. These families here tonight had to live with that for all of those years. Imagine what that must have felt like. We have had a situation in this country where people suffer the trauma of the initial bereavement, the incident that took their loved ones away. Then they are re-traumatised by the behaviour of the state. We can't take that hurt away tonight, but we can put decency back at the heart of the British state, and that is what this bill does. And I finish again by praising the Prime Minister for making it happen, and this truly is his legacy. Thank you very much.
I'd like your general reaction, Sir Gavin. I'd also like to ask you specifically, as someone, as Defence Secretary, you'll of course deal to some extent with the intelligence services, with MI5 and MI6. There are specific protections in regard to spies and what they say or don't say when it comes to a duty of candour. I just wonder what your perspective is on that and how we get the truth when it comes to things going wrong. You've talked about that a second ago when you were a government minister, but also a duty of candour, very, very important thing, should have happened years ago when it's come to Hillsborough, but also how do we protect the intelligence services within that, do you think?
So in my constituency, we saw a very similar sort of situation of trying to get to the truth, and that was the Mid Staffordshire Hospital Trust, where under Mr Burnham's watch, actually local people, where it was estimated between 400 and 1,000 people lost their lives as a result of the trust not being properly run. Refused to have a public inquiry, and eventually that was given in 2010 when he left office. So he's right to highlight this, as it's really important, because it's so vital for families who had that loss are able to get the type of closure that they need and have an understanding as to what has happened so they can get at the truth. And I hope that this legislation will have got the right balance between making sure that families are able to get at the truth and actually they're not spending years and years and years battling the health secretary, battling police chief constables, but also making sure that our security services are properly able to operate. The government has, I believe, tried to address some of those concerns. There's still some concerns that out there, but it is my hope that the Act will have got as close to it as possible.
Speaking of accountability for Andy Burnham, you correctly mentioned Mid Staffordshire and the scandal there, which I don't think has been mentioned nearly enough, actually, in recent weeks when it's come to Andy Burnham. There has been a movement or an attempt by your party to get him to do at least one Prime Minister's questions, to shift the date of recess and so on. Do you think, in general, that Andy Burnham has had even nearly the amount of scrutiny that is needed for an incoming Prime Minister?
Well, there's been no scrutiny at all. I mean, other than a very vague, woolly speech made in Manchester, where no media people were able to ask any questions, and I think a brief appearance on Reddit. You know, no one really has
He did do one radio interview, but I don't think we learned a huge amount from it.
Well, that's because it wasn't with you, Peter. But hopefully that will be rectified very soon. You know, there's been no scrutiny. There's been no explaining as to what he stands for. And actually, I think he's been politically naive here, because actually it's a brilliant opportunity. He's the new Prime Minister. He's been proclaimed by acclamation of his party. He should be wanting to come to Parliament next week, actually to set out his agenda, to say this is what he's all about. But he seems to be running scared. If I would have been expecting him wanting to show that he's hitting the ground running, he's got an agenda, he's excited to be Prime Minister, and these are the things he's going to do. And instead, he's using Alan Campbell, who's desperate to keep his job in Cabinet, so he's desperately sucking up to the incoming Prime Minister, who's basically shoving aside all elements of scrutiny. And I think that's a shame, because actually, we should have that level of scrutiny. We should be able to ask the Prime Minister a few questions before a 6-week-long break. And also the Prime Minister should be wanting to tell the nation what Andy Burnham is. It's not just all about wearing a T-shirt.
Do you think Andy Burnham will be a better Prime Minister than Keir Starmer?
Well, you desperately hope so, because there seems to have been a man who's Prime Minister that just seems to be desperate to give away all Britain's national interests, whether that's Chagos, weakening our grip on Gibraltar, whether it is taxing business out of existence. So I travel with a hope that Burnham will be better, because that's in the interests of our country.
What do you make of Starmer getting the Legion d'Honneur from France?
Well, it probably rather tells you a lot. Maybe that's the French have been asked by Mauritius to give it to him as a thank you for trying to hand over the Chagos Islands and billions of pounds. I mean, I don't know what sort of deal's been going on in the background there, Peter. But you're a journalist. You're probably much better plugged in. But
I'm sure.
I always got the impression he preferred France to Britain, but maybe I'm.
Certainly said he preferred Davos to Westminster. Anyway, just finally, again, as a former Education Secretary, they're now talking about this midnight curfew on social media. Do you think that's a good idea?
I think the ban on those who are under 16, we're seeing social media have a real impact on young people. I think the state shouldn't keep going too far. I think we've got to sort of draw some limits. Let's not start having bans, curfews at noon. Next, the Labour government will stop us walking our dogs in the street past midnight, or whatever it is. Let's not be too controlling of people's lives. Let's give people a little bit of freedom, a little bit of an idea that they're in charge of their own destiny without having to ask the Prime Minister as to what they can do all the time.
There speaks the proud owner of a Cocker Spaniel. Sir Gavin, thank you very much indeed. Sir Gavin Williamson there, former Defence Secretary and former Education Secretary, joining us on all sorts of topics. We will go to the debate desk in a second, and I'll read out your messages in a second, but I just want to give you an update. As promised, I did make inquiries. Quite a number of people actually contacted me about Ann Widdecombe's cat, Aloysius. And you can see a picture on the screen there of Aloysius the cat, who is a ginger cat, and she was very happy with him and had numerous cats throughout her life, all rescue cats as well, including Pugwash, who is another black and white cat, which I tweeted about as well. So the good news is that Aloysius, obviously tragic in regard to Ann Widdecombe, absolutely dreadful, and we'll continue to discuss her murder and the reaction to that. But when it comes to Aloysius himself, I contacted Ann Widdecombe's representatives today, her agents, and they said Aloysius was removed from the scene very quickly. He is safe, well cared for, and Ann's family will decide a long-term plan. So he's with someone very happy at the moment. It's a temporary solution, but the family are going to sort out a long-term plan. And I was also told by a very nice woman at the management of Ann Widdecombe's management, she said, rest assured Aloysius is being his usual bossy self. So whilst it is obviously horrendous in regard to Ann Widdecombe, many people getting in touch asking about her beloved cat, and the good news is that Aloysius is well, he is being well cared for, and a long-term plan for his well-being will be worked out. And another example, Ann Widdecombe, of her compassion and the fact that she was someone who really cared about animals, particularly rescue animals, and had a series of rescue cats. I'll read out some of your messages in just a moment. We will also go to the debate desk. Phil Dave and Vincent Moss are with us this evening. I'd love to hear from you on all sorts of topics, whatever you'd like to say this evening, however you'd like to say it. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Welcome to Down the Local, the show that goes from pub to pub across the country, speaking to the punters about the subjects driving us all nuts at the moment.
That's Rachel Reeves, Rachel Thieves, Rachel McCown.
I don't really know Meghan Markle. I know Meghan Markle from Suits, and that's about it.
I don't know about anyone else, and I don't know where this is going. I have 0% beard, and I feel
Raising the flag, I think, is symptomatic of its desperation.
Is public transport good value for money?
No, it isn't.
You really don't like speaking to people.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to JB from Aberdeenshire, who says, on PPE, we're not surprised with the PPE scandal. Our company, with specialist knowledge and the ability to supply all the PPE needed at the time and offered it at cost, were run round in circles by the inept politicians in charge at the time. Of course, the problem was we were not party donors. We could have supplied the product easily and quickly. We checked the certification of 62 face masks supplied to the NHS and on sale generally, and 62 had counterfeit certification. The Spanish government gave us no problems at all. We supplied all their needs. Our political lot made a complete mess of the situation in their haste to do their mates a favour. It's disgraceful, says JB in Aberdeenshire. Thank you for that. Keith in Nottingham says, evening Peter, evening Keith. Lessons learned, apologies made, costing the taxpayer £10 billion. How many ships in our navy? And that is, it was in that cliched answer. Alex says, good on Williamson for making an apology. It's the first one I've heard in a while. It's not difficult and gains my respect. Refreshing. Maureen says, seeing as they have now decided to call the state pension a benefit, does that mean we pensioners are exempt from this hosepipe ban? That was the story we did last night. Sarah in Weymouth says, Peter, that was lovely that you followed up on Anne's cat, Aloysius. Thank you, that was super kind. Anne would appreciate that so much. She loved her cat. She certainly did. And the good news is that Aloysius is absolutely fine, being cared for properly, has been found, and all is well with him. And we'll talk a lot more, of course, about the investigation into Ann Widdecombe's horrendous murder. Bit of breaking news now first, and Andy Burnham's allies have succeeded in blocking Ed Miliband from becoming Chancellor. Shabana Mahmood apparently now the front runner for the role after concerns that Ed Miliband will become a lightning rod for criticism. The Times is reporting, this is Stephen Swinford, the political editor of the Times, and when he reports it, it's right. Senior allies of Andy Burnham believe they have succeeded in preventing Ed Miliband becoming Chancellor over concerns he would become a lightning rod for criticism. Three figures around the Prime Minister have told Steve Swinford, his podcast, The State of It, which is well worth listening to, the political podcast from the Times and Sunday Times, that they believe that Burnham has been persuaded not to include Miliband when he announces his top team next Monday. Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary, spoke to Burnham about the economy during a meeting last week, although the bulk of their discussion apparently focused on home affairs. We'll get reaction to that just quickly now with Phil Dave, the talk presenter. Phil, it's lovely to see you. How are you doing? Well?
Very good, thanks, Peter. Hopefully you are as well.
Yes, indeed. And Vincent Moss is with us, the former political editor of the Sunday Mirror. How are you, Vincent?
Hi, Peter. Very well, thank you.
What do you make of this Ed Miliband news?
Well, it was expected he might be the Chancellor, but he was always a controversial choice because it would have annoyed the city. His commitment to net zero was something people weren't keen on. And if he's been ruled out, that's probably good news for Andy Burnham in many ways, because the last thing he wanted to do was spark a run on the bond markets. Big question is now, if not Ed Miliband, who will it be now? I think Shabana Mahmood's done a very good job at the Home Office, and there'll be pressure to keep her there. Other names in the frame have been people like Pat McFadden, for example, and he's seen by many as a good, sensible head and a good choice potentially for the job.
Do you think Wes Streeting out completely?
I think out of that job, but I think he could get a cabinet job because, of course, he didn't run for the top job.
Yes.
And there was always a suspicion a deal was done behind closed doors, and we'll find out soon enough, probably in the next week or so. So probably not Wes Streeting chance. The other thing I think Andy Burnham will be keen to do is he will want to show that it's a balanced team, and he'll want, of the top four jobs, Foreign, Home, Chancellor, and his job, he'll want to show probably at least a couple of those women in those posts.
Yes, indeed. Phil, I know you're a great love of Ed Miliband and all his policies. In the words of Holly Willoughby, are you okay?
Well, let's put it this way. I would suggest that Andy Burnham, if this is indeed the case and has decided not to give Miliband the job of Chancellor, that is a sign that actually here is an incoming Prime Minister who does know how to make a sensible decision, because I believe that Ed Miliband has not exactly proven himself a worthy minister based on his actions in recent years. And if you would cast your mind back far enough to think of what he was capable of doing to his own brother when he was well, let's not dwell on that, but you know, obviously what he did
running for leader in 2010,
basically when it came down to leadership as well for that. You know, it just goes to show that here is a man who has very limited scruples, and I think that is me putting it very politely. And I can't help but think that there will be a huge sigh of relief to many, many businesses and individuals alike out there who would say, if this is indeed the case and Miliband is not going to be the next Chancellor, phew.
Yes, David Miliband, the only politician who's ever left politics to spend less time with his family. We will come back to the other big stories of the day. Just want to talk to you about that breaking news first. We'll take a little break now, and then we'll talk about so many other things to talk about Ann Widdecombe's murder investigation, what we've been told and not told as well. I'd love to hear from you as well. Whatever you think about what Phil and Vincent have been saying and will say in the next half an hour or so, do give me a shout. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Go on a big holiday. Immigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 83338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 83338 now. This is a network promotion, full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks to everybody who's been in touch, including Dave, who says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Dave. When a Prime Minister is appointed and they change all the cabinet positions, does that not tell the public that the new Prime Minister thinks they've all done a crap job to date? Well, to a degree, but not necessarily. He could be rewarding people, he could be putting his own people in, he could be taking people who aren't loyal to him out. So much of it is about loyalty, Vincent, isn't it? It's about patronage rather than necessarily who will do the best job.
Oh, very much so. And he knows who supported him over the last year or so when he's been desperately angling to get this job.
Yes.
And those people will be rewarded. There are particularly a couple of key women, Lou Haig and Annalise Midgley, the Liverpool MP, both expected to get senior roles. And there'll be people who he's not that politically close to, and they will be going. So it's the big Westminster guessing game. We'll all know in probably about July the 20th or very soon after when he officially becomes Prime Minister.
This time next week, really.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So only not too long to go, but critical positions. And yes, it's exactly that. It's about rewarding those who are your mates, basically, and those who've helped you get there, and basically sacking people who you think are going to cause you problems or who have underperformed. And there's probably a long list of names on the underperforming list from many people's point of view.
What can I say? That's definitely not a short list when it comes to, I'm afraid, the Labour politicians of this current ilk. I would suggest that one name that hasn't come up very much recently, who I do I've got great concern over, who still could be potentially given the top job of Chancellor, of course, is Angela Rayner. You know, let us know.
I don't think she's going to be Chancellor. I think that would be unlikely.
I would highly doubt it, but it's not impossible.
So perhaps we give them something. Just two dates for your diary. One, of course, is next Monday, the 20th. The interesting thing, I was talking to someone who knows a lot about the Downing Street operation today, actually, who said, there's a lot of what ifs in this, but what if England win the World Cup on Sunday night? Keir Starmer could, in theory, be out there for that. He said that he wants to do that. Comes back, changes, and then all the front pages are England. They're nothing to do with Andy Burnham. And you could have people on the street, you could have, you know, traffic problems, you could have all sorts of issues because people would, you know, a lot of people would take the day off. There's a lot of logistical aspects to that, which I think have perhaps not been entirely considered. Thanks to Joanna in Salisbury, who says, I think Ed Miliband shot himself in the foot. Ed Miliband was prepared to open up North Sea oil wells for personal gain, but how about for the good of the UK? And Graham says, there's a Legion d'Honour medal received by Starmer from Macron in the shape of a dinghy. That is Graham in Bushy. Very, very good point there. We'll return to that a little while, but maybe ask you now, Phil, do you think Starmer deserves the Legion d'Honour?
Yeah, this is going to be a very quick conversation. No, but I'm not in the least bit surprised he gets it, because he's terribly pally with Macron, and frankly, the two of them share some very bizarre views. So I would imagine that Macron is probably devastated.
Well, he's certainly been a big figure in the coalition of the willing. Vincent, do you think he deserves the Legion d'Honour?
Well, I think you get to a point in the Premiership he's going. He's done a lot to try and bring Britain closer to Europe, which is pretty much Labour's existing policy at the moment. So not a surprise, got on very well with Macron. I certainly think that is less embarrassing potentially than the Peace Prize that Donald Trump got from FIFA, which I think, as gongs to world leaders go, takes the biscuit.
Or the question I always ask, which is, and maybe the two of you know, what did Barack Obama get the Nobel Peace Prize for? Go.
I don't know.
Nobody knows. Nobody knows what he got it for.
A novelty.
Nobody ever remembers. Right then, on a much more serious topic, let's remember and let's talk about the police investigation into Ann Widdecombe. And this really frustrates me because we were told at the start there's no evidence of a counter-terror aspect to this or terrorism aspect to this. We're not told that they weren't sure, and we were told that there wasn't a targeted political aspect to this. Now we're told it's a targeted attack. Just listen to the words of Assistant Commissioner Lawrence Taylor. He is of the Metropolitan Police. He's the man in charge of counter-terror in this country. This is what he said.
Counter-terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Ann Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack.
Speaking of Devon and Cornwall police, that's the police force in Ann Widdecombe's in her home's area, which were initially doing the investigation. They're still involved, but they've been defended by the Police and Crime Commissioner for that area, whose name is Alison Hernandez. This is what she said.
There's been quite a bit of commentary about the way that Devon and Cornwall police have communicated during the early stages of this case. But as the Home Secretary said yesterday, it is not unusual that in a fast-paced investigation, more information comes to light and changes the nature or the character of what the police are dealing with. Since beginning the investigation, I've been briefed by the Chief Constable regularly, and I'm confident that Devon and Cornwall Police has provided a substantial and professional response to Ann Widdecombe's death.
Substantial and professional. I want to get the reaction of Vincent and Phil, but I just want to read you what David in the Cotswolds has sent me first of all. David says, after being lectured to by the Devon and Cornwall police about speculating on the alleged murder of Ann Widdecombe and being told in press conferences by them that there is nothing to suggest her murder was not politically motivated, and now finding out that the anti-terror branch of the police service have taken over, then why haven't Devon and Cornwall police service referred to themselves to the Independent Office of Police Conduct? Or is it perfectly okay for a police service to provide misleading information to the general public when it concerns a high-profile right-wing public figure? I feel Ann's demise is being brushed under the rug. It is disgusting, says David in the Cotswolds. What do you make of that, Phil?
So I don't think it's a case of being brushed under the rug. Look, obviously, it's, you know, there aren't enough words to describe how horrific this is. I can't believe we're sat here talking about the murder of Ann Widdecombe, someone who was literally just over a week ago on this channel as a regular contributor. She
less than a week ago.
For a very great number of years. So I haven't still got my head around it. But I do think, and you won't often hear me defending the police because I have major problems with them, but I believe that in an investigation like this, where it is very fast-paced and they are looking for a lot of evidence, one would assume, to try and catch the killer or perpetrators in the plural as quickly as possible, if you have a situation where you're giving too much away and that either A, gives other people ideas, or worse still, it potentially hinders the case being solved, I'm sure no one would want to run the risk of not finding who's done this.
And I agree with all that, Phil, but they don't have... What they could have said is, we don't know. If someone says, is there a terrorism aspect? They could have said, really early in the investigation, we don't know. Was this a politically targeted assassination? We don't know. It's too early to say. They could have said that, and they didn't.
They could have done, but their wording wasn't far dissimilar. They said there's no evidence to suggest it is. So that's kind of a similar thing, isn't it?
Vincent, what do you think?
I think it's been a communications problem, really, and the problem has been that since the Southport murders and things like that, the police have been under intense pressure to reveal what they know, and I think they probably said too much too early this time before they were fully aware of more of the facts. And that's partly the pressure on the media and others, because we all want to know what's going on. Is there a risk to other people? And also, Devon and Cornwall, this is a rarity for them, and they're not used to handling these sort of cases, and the media and the profile and everything else. And I think they got that bit wrong. But, by the way, that doesn't mean they've got the investigation wrong. I just think they've got the handling of the media and the communications wrong. And hopefully the police will do their job, and the perpetrator, is a man in custody, we can't talk too much about that, is brought to justice. But I think it's the initial communications, and they were trying to do the right thing, but they clearly got it wrong and they confused people.
I tell you what I don't like, though, very much don't like, is when, towards the start of when we first learnt about this, obviously I know it was only a few days ago, but when we first heard about it, there were those who were in the Reform Party, or associated at least with Reform, who expressed very clearly that they were gravely concerned that this was a targeted attack, and indeed that there was murder in mind when it came to this. Before we knew any details of even knowing that it was a murder investigation, there were people who very quickly shut it down and said, no, don't be ridiculous, you don't know what you're talking about, you're just using this as a political incentive, a propaganda, whatever you want to call it. And it's those people I have an issue with, because I don't like people who think they know it all, basically sort of like rubbishing those who make perfectly valid points. And as it now turns out, sadly, those who were saying this was politically motivated, those who were saying that this was targeted, actually made valid points. Don't get me wrong, I mean, I recognise that this is more about the police and their communication, but that's a massive part of it as well. It's because certainly the way social media works now as well, a lot of people become experts when they're really not.
But similarly, we also know that people like Nigel Farage will have got briefings from, well, we know the Prime Minister said he briefed Nigel Farage. We know he would have been briefed by the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall, so he would know more than was in the public domain as well. So people shouting them down, I think, was naive. Interesting thoughts on that. What do you think about how this has been handled? Is it just a communications issue, or is there a more fundamental problem? Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. Graham says, would Devon and Cornwall even know what day it is? They're institutionally incompetent. Catherine in Northumberland says, hi Peter, great show. If we're going to talk about underperforming ministers, what about the bitter and spiteful Bridget Phillipson, our Education Secretary, responsible for closing down 128 private schools and forcing 43,000 children out of their schools? Surely she should be up for the sack, says Catherine in Northumberland. Well, we will see what happens, certainly to Bridget Phillipson, next Monday and Tuesday when that reshuffle happens, because the Prime Minister, the new Prime Minister, will be Andy Burnham. And actually, just a little date for your diary, I'm going to be on Downing Street that day. It's my 4th time as a talk broadcaster that there is a change in Prime Minister. Boris to Truss was the first one, then Truss to Rishi Sunak, then Rishi Sunak to Keir Starmer, now Keir Starmer to Andy Burnham. So I'll be on Downing Street on Monday reporting into all the different programmes. And as usual, at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, when Prime Minister's questions are on, I am here tomorrow with Mark Dolan, actually, because Julia's off, so I'll be on with Mark Dolan at 12 o'clock tomorrow, 12 noon, for Keir Starmer's final Prime Minister's questions. Alison's been in touch and says, they must think we're stupid. As soon as I heard about Anne, my first thought was due to her political leaning. We all knew she was outspoken, brilliantly so, and certain people in our society don't like it. I still blame all of the issues because of the language the Labour Party have used in the last 2 years, says Alison. And thank you to Maria and Jules, who have sent very nice messages, Maria in Cornwall and Jules in Bristol, about my just finding out about Aloysius. I mean, the thing that I always say about my programmes is, this is my programme, but it's your programme too. You tell me you want to talk about something something, you tell me you want to find something out or, you know, do something for you, and there's, you know, not to blow my own trumpet, but there's some stuff I do kind of behind the scenes with various people as well, tried to help a few people as well to use the show to do that, because there is a great power in broadcasting, and even if it is just saying, hi, I'm a journalist, you know, what's happened in this particular instance. We'll be back in the debate desk with Phil Dave and Vincent Moss in a second. I'd love to hear your views on what they're saying. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
The Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the Royal Tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes in a second. Do send them in, 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about PPE, personal protective equipment, and this Dame Heather Hallett's inquiry into COVID showing that £10 billion was wasted. Astonishing, Vincent.
Absolutely astonishing. I mean, but the big question is incompetence or fraud, really, and probably both, I suspect, at the end of the day.
There's no evidence of fraud that she has found, but there are, of course, a couple of active investigations into various people, including Michelle Mone, about that.
There's some active cases, and there's some people who have become multi-millionaires as a result of these contracts. Now, let's not forget, at the time, everybody was desperate for PPE. There was a rush to get it, a global rush to get it, and there were probably some very bad contracts laid, and some of that will have just been incompetence. But at the end of the day, some people got very, very rich out of this, and a lot of this PPE was never, ever, ever used. So it's literally a criminal, both in the sort of literal and the sort of probably active sense of the word, waste of money. But all that happens at the end of the day is people say lessons should be learned and we'll do it differently next time. But will we?
Expression. Ugh, what a ghastly. Lessons are never learned.
I know.
When I hear this. But, you know, there's a couple of things that cross my mind. I feel like I should be more angry about this than I am, but the truth is I'm just not surprised. But I do think it is. I don't know why I'm being so fair this evening. I'm not sure what's wrong with me. But I do think that it's very easy to look back with hindsight and say that too much was ordered. As you rightly reminded us, Vincent, the truth is there was a massive scramble on for PPE at the time of COVID where we all thought it made a difference. Of course, we now know better that actually, to the vast majority, it probably didn't make much of a difference at all. But the point being is, at the time, we thought it did, and we needed it, and we were worried that Britain wasn't going to have enough because naturally we had to import
a lot of it was defective anyway. I mean, Nicola Brooke, who's a solicitor who represents the COVID-19 Bereaved Families for Justice UK campaign group, attacked the inquiry's findings. She said, today's report reveals the shocking level of corruption and cronyism at the heart of government, resulting in billions of pounds lost as companies sought to profit while thousands died. What is equally shocking is the chair's failure to call this corruption out after she inexplicitly failed to call crucial witnesses involved in some of the most scandalous surplus contracts. It should be said that Heather Hallett's report did not include her findings on MedPro due to the ongoing National Crime Agency investigation into the firm that is linked to Baroness Moan, Michelle Moan, and her husband Doug Barham. And both Lady Moan and Mr Barham deny wrongdoing, and the Aquarius said it will release its findings on MedPro once any criminal proceedings have concluded. So there is more to come on this, certainly. Should Boris Johnson apologise, do you think?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think one of the things about these VIP lanes is the amount of people that were found to have connections to the Conservative Party. I mean, the reports talk about 32 people who had referred people to the VIP lane. Of those, 15 had connections with the Conservative Party. So it was very much seen as jobs and contracts for your mates. And there were still now a lot of good clothing contractors and clothing PPE providers.
Yeah, well, we heard from one earlier on. Yeah, exactly.
We couldn't get these contracts, and yet we saw them going to people who couldn't do the job.
I know a place in Belfast that does exactly this kind of stuff that couldn't get any hearing on it. The VIP lanes suppliers 13 times more likely to be awarded contracts, but more likely to have issues with performance as well. Frontline workers left without adequate PPE to protect themselves and loved ones. The findings also include that the UK's over-reliance on China for PPE left it dangerously exposed. Government transparency lacking, unfair VIP lane, diminished public trust. And that's, when all is said and done, when the dust settles on all of this, it is about public trust. You've got to say, if this happens again, you can talk about lessons learned, it's a horrible phrase, and I agree with that. Lessons are never learned. But the point is, when this, if, God forbid, something like this happens again, or we, for whatever reason, need to very quickly acquire a lot of something, whatever it is, like this, will it be done right the next time? And I'm not confident it will.
No, I'm not either. And I think that what we need to keep in mind as well is that unless those who were responsible for this almighty mess-up, I'll call it, of handling the COVID pandemic come forward and admit their wrongdoings, then there is a very real danger to life when, heaven forbid, another pandemic comes along, because people simply won't trust the authorities who are tasked with keeping us safe, because people simply won't follow their orders.
Or just any form of scramble for anything that needs to be done. Let's talk about Hillsborough and the law that is being passed tonight. Andy Burnham has paid tribute to the Prime Minister on this. Let's hear what Andy Burnham, this is his first time as a new MP for Makerfield, talking in the House of Commons. This is what he said.
Let's finish where I started, that the Liverpool supporters were blamed for harming their own fellow supporters at a football match. That is what was done. That was left to stand for all of those years. These families here tonight had to live with that for all of those years. Imagine what that must have felt like. We have had a situation in this country where people suffer the trauma of the initial bereavement, the incident that took their loved ones away. Then they are re-traumatised by the behaviour of the state. We can't take that hurt away tonight, but we can put decency back at the heart of the British state, and that is what this bill does. And I finish again by praising the Prime Minister for making it happen, and this truly is his legacy. Thank you very much.
Andy Burnham was speaking in the House of Commons earlier. On Monday, he will become the Prime Minister. On Friday, he will become the leader of the Labour Party. He's fought for this for a long time, Vincent. I know you followed this story for some years. Just tell me your thoughts on where we are right now.
Yeah, on the brink of it finally becoming law, and about time too, really. It's taken far too long. I think Keir Starmer said this would be enacted a year ago. It still might be another year, although it's going to the third reading today and has to go through the House of Lords. It could be another year before it's enacted. But it's a critical piece of legislation, not just about Hillsborough. It's about other establishment cover-ups, the inflected blood scandal, the Horizon Post Office scandal, the grooming gangs, Grenfell, all sorts of things where there's accusations of institutional cover-up. And hopefully this long-delayed legislation will mean that is less likely to happen.
What do you think, Phil?
Well, hallelujah is all I can say. But at the same time, I do think we need to look at the timing of this, because, as you rightly say, Starmer mentioned this about a year ago, potentially, and it's now on potentially his last week as Prime Minister. Potentially it is his last week.
He wants this to be his legacy, certainly, yeah.
He introduces this at exactly the same time that, miraculously, after years of crying out for it, oh, yeah, the IRGC has finally been prescribed. You know, it's all of these things that we're not fools. He's doing this at a very deliberate time to make himself look good as he walks out the door. Yeah. And that's what I don't like. Having said that, at least it gets passed, and that's what counts. You know, I believe that sort of the number of times that we've sort of seen examples of all of the ones that you mentioned there, Vincent, about systematic cover-ups time and time again where victims are just sort of basically put out with the trash. They don't care at all. Who cares what happens to the victims and their families, as long as our leaders, our MPs and these institutions, as long as they save their own skin. It's revolting. It's about damn time that they were held accountable, and I really, really hope this law is properly pushed through and actually put to good use when it do find that there are people who've deliberately covered up all of those things that you mentioned and more.
Absolutely. You're right on the timings. The one thing that it does make you wonder with all the criticism of Keir Starmer's leadership is why didn't he do these things earlier?
Yes, beforehand. He wants a legacy, and that's part of what he does. I mean, it might not quite be for the right reason, but actually, if it's done, that's all right, with me anyway. Just a couple more things I want to talk about, including the BBC. We've had the annual release of presenters' salaries. Scott Mills, before he was sacked, was the highest paid BBC presenter. The highest paid journalist is a man called Stephen Nolan, who you probably haven't heard of. He is a BBC Northern Ireland journalist. And then we also have the fact that 500,000 people have decided not to pay their licence fee as well and are opting out of that. What do you make of that, Phil?
Well, I think that the reason why 500,000 people are not paying the licence fee, and I would say that although I don't necessarily condone what is technically illegal if you are consuming BBC content or indeed live television content, that also goes for live TV online as well. A lot of people don't realise this. I would say that I understand why they protest against it and don't want to pay it. I do believe that it would be a terrible shame if we lost the BBC. For a long time I have said I don't want to see the BBC go. I don't necessarily want to see the licence fee go, but I do want to see the BBC finally start to listen to those who actually pay their wages and say, do you know what, something's clearly very wrong here. In terms of what I make of it, I'd say that editorially the BBC has gone wrong for such a long time now. They are blinded by their own bias that they actually believe they do nothing wrong now. That's how long it's been the rot has been setting in. And I think that now's the time they need to sit up and realise that actually, no, they don't need to save money by binning off middle management. They do. They don't necessarily need to save money by not paying their top talent as much as they do. It's they need to realise that there is a major problem there and they need to tackle it quickly.
What do you think, Vincent? 500,000 people leaving the BBC. You see some of these salaries, which are not necessarily bigger or smaller than last year, really. Some have gone down a little bit. Laura Koonsberg, £409,000. Alan Shearer, 400 grand. Scott Mills was on £750,000. Lots and lots of money, and way more than the average wage in this country. But the point is, I suppose, these are very, very highly paid people. What I think is much more significant is the 500,000 people who have stopped paying the licence fee. That, to me, would be much more worrying as a licence fee payer myself than the high salaries, which, you know, I don't think a lot of those people deserve, but that's sort of the point, but not really.
Well, yeah, right, two things going on there. I mean, I think the 500,000 people not paying it is a real problem for the BBC. It's an existential crisis, as the Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy described it as. And what's happening is you used to go to jail potentially for not paying the licence fee, and now you probably don't. So more and more people are not paying it. I do think if you consume the BBC in the same way you would have a Netflix subscription or an Amazon subscription, you should pay for it. So if you're watching the BBC, whether you like it or not, you should pay for it. What the BBC needs to do is find a model that works. The Royal Charter's coming to an end under which the BBC runs in December 2027. They need to find a subscription model, probably, or something similar that works, so we can have a well-funded, BBC that everybody can enjoy. That's vital. On the salaries, yeah, some of them are probably still a bit too big. I'd say the three Match of the Day presenters, though, combined now get less than Gary Lineker got, so they're making some reductions.
Very, very interesting point. Andy Burnham has said there should be a serious review of MP security. He says, I'm certainly prepared to do that following Ann Widdecombe's killing. More on that coming up in just a few minutes' time. But I want to ask you, just before we go to the news, of the Killjoy Council. This is Portsmouth tearing down an England flag on the eve of the semi-final. An England fan left stunned after two Portsmouth City Council officials cut down a St George's flag ahead of the England semi-final clash with Argentina. That's tomorrow night, of course. Footage shared with the Hampshire Reform Councillor George Madgwick appears to show two men arriving at a property in Portsmouth's Charles Dickens ward, removing the flag and walking away with it. Portsmouth City Council's website states flags and any other items attached to lampposts or any other council property will be reviewed according to our normal processes, and a removed in due course unless they pose a hazard, in which case they will be moved as soon as possible. Councillor Madgwick says it's because it'll be because it's a fire risk in a housing block. However, common sense should prevail. It's attached to a steel pipe on concrete. What do you make of this, Phil?
Well, I do think that there must be a reason it was removed. I don't necessarily think that it was necessary on the eve of a semi-final with England featured in that semi-final that they had to do it. I'm fairly sure it would have been okay. But then at the under... I
mean, 10 Downing Street has St George's crosses on its windows as well.
True.
So I don't think Westminster Council is going to come around and take those down.
No, I don't at all. Listen, don't get me wrong. As far as I'm concerned, fly as many England flags as you want. I'm not ashamed of our national flag. In fact, on the contrary, I'm very, very proud of it. And I think anyone who says otherwise or accuses it of being a racist symbol is frankly a moron. But I'd be very straightforward and say that I believe that there wasn't much risk from what I could see of leaving this up for just a few more days. But at the same time, I know there are rules and regulations to keep people safe for a reason, so it's tricky.
I'm not a killjoy, but I just think with flags, I feel the same way about them as graffiti and things that attach to lampposts and things. If you put them up and you're going to take them down in a couple of weeks, great. But most people don't. They put them up, they leave them up.
Really tatty.
They get tatty, dishevelled, and that's dirty, and it looks grubby. And you don't want things
I see that in Northern Ireland all the time, where they let it go tatty and all the rest of it. I mean, if you're going to have pride in it, then it should be, they have rules in America, for example, about lighting flags, how they should be disposed of, how you've got to sort of take them down at night, things like that. And I think we should abide by that as well.
Exactly. If you're going to put them up, take them down. Don't leave them there so they sort of look tatty and dishevelled and ragged and all the rest of it. That just scours the landscape, and it just is an excuse for people to put graffiti and other fly posting things like that up. So put them up, have it, celebrate, hope England win, but take them down afterwards.
Of course, a very quick, simple remedy to this would be if councils actually took more pride in their flags and actually put them up themselves professionally and properly, then maybe people wouldn't feel the need to put them in places they shouldn't have to.
Thank you both very much indeed. Flying the flag on the debate desk this evening, Phil Dave, talk presenter and former political editor of the Sunday Mirror, Vincent Moss. Really appreciate you both joining us. Thanks to everybody who's been in touch as well. Debbie says, Burnham talking about cover-up, 2 words, rape gangs. Carl says, my company was a PPE supplier before COVID and we applied to help through the government at a very reduced cost to try to help, but we were rejected at every application. It also made our company collapse. We had to destroy PPE as it goes out of date. Also, Alex in Cardiff says, I wonder how much money Keir Starmer's human rights lawyer friends the mess up, and Boris Johnson needs to apologise for plenty of money being made for Keir Starmer's friends. No angel Starmer is either, says Alex. So lots of opinions there. No suggestion, of course, that Keir Starmer's corrupt. Lots to discuss in the next hour. We'll speak to a senior member of Reform UK about Ann Widdecombe's murder, and that investigation is becoming more controversial by the day. Let me know your thoughts too on all of that. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
It's just gone 8 o'clock. Thank you so much to everybody who is still with us. Believe me, the France and Spain match, I will keep you updated if there's any score or any significant news from that. But stick with us right through until 10 o'clock because we've plenty to talk about, including the murder of Ann Widdecombe, the changing nature of that investigation. We will talk about that with the senior member of Reform UK in just a moment. We'll also be talking about the social media ban and the fact that a midnight deadline, ban from midnight, is going to be imposed on 16 and 17-year-olds. I mean, how is that actually possible? We'll speak to a mother and her child about that. We'll also talk about the BBC losing 500,000 licence fee payers in a year of scandals, and Scott Mills, who was at the centre of one of those scandals, he was sacked. He was the highest paid presenter at £750,000. Lots to discuss in all of that. Also, £10 billion of taxpayers' money wasted. The Hillsborough Law is looking set to pass very, very soon. And should we stockpile food in case of a Russian cyber attack? So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock, and I want to make sure that I get all your texts, tweets, voice notes, and of course calls on the air. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 722 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring on 0344 499 1000. And just some breaking news I've literally just received. The US has launched new attacks on Iran. Donald Trump U-turning on a plan to charge shipping for using the Strait of Hormuz, but he says he remains committed to reimposing a blockade on the Iranian port. In the Iranian ports. Stay with us. Lots to discuss in all of that. 0344 499 1000. Thanks everybody who has been in touch, not least about the Ann Widdecombe story. That nature of that investigation changing every day. We were told immediately, oh, there's no terrorism aspect of this. We were told, no, we don't think there's a targeted aspect of it. That has all fallen apart. The police communication has not been good, and Sarah has sent us a voice note on this. This is what Sarah has to say.
I'm just thinking that the police should stop wasting money on DEI and perhaps invest in media training for their higher ranking officers, because clearly they need it. They've had so many high profile cases now. It's about time they started learning from their previous mistakes. All they had to do was just say, we don't have a clear motive at the moment, but we're doing everything we can, etc., etc. We're going to speculate. It's human nature. It's going to happen. So it's just a nonsense. They need to learn. I'm sorry, there's no excuse.
Well, that is a very, very interesting message from Sarah, and thank you. Let's just go back a little bit and have a look at what Lawrence Taylor, who's the Assistant Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, has been saying about this. He is the counter-terror chief, the most senior officer who on a day-to-day basis does counter-terror in this country. This is what Lawrence Taylor said in an update to the Ann Widdecombe murder case.
Counter-terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Ann Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack.
Then the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alison Hernandez, she's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Devon and Cornwall. She gave an update and she defended the force that she oversees, or at least holds to account. She said that they have done a good investigation so far. I wonder what you think about this. 0344 499 1000. Let's hear what the Police and Crime Commissioner, Alison Hernandez, had to say today.
There's been quite a bit of commentary about the way that Devon and Cornwall Police have communicated during the early stages of this case. But as the Home Secretary said yesterday, it is not unusual that in a fast-paced investigation, more information comes to light and changes the nature or the character of what the police are dealing with. Since beginning the investigation, I've been briefed by the Chief Constable regularly, and I'm confident that Devon and Cornwall Police has provided a substantial and professional response to Ann Widdecombe's death.
So that was interesting. Substantial and professional. I wonder what you think about that. Was it substantial? Was it professional? Because the thing is that when you're told this stuff, as a journalist, I mean, I'm always sceptical about what people in authority say. I'm always sceptical about what most people say. Part of my job is to question things, you know, question answers and answer questions. And if it's substantial and professional, why were we told from the offset that there was no terror link? Why were we told from the offset that there was no targeted nature? We're now told there is a targeted nature. And interestingly, Reform UK politicians, including Nigel Farage, were saying at various points that they believed that there was a political element to this. When you have someone of Ann Widdecombe's level of fame, a load of people knew who she was, a load of people who aren't interested in politics at all knew who she was. And this was evidenced by the fact that, you know, my phone had loads of people contacting me, knowing I'm very interested in politics and I'm someone who broadcasts about politics, asking me about it. People who knew her from Strictly Come Dancing, for example, people who knew her from Celebrity Big Brother, people who knew her from all the different television appearances she did. In fact, she had an appearance on this station, I should say, just less than a week ago, just minutes actually before she was apparently murdered. So there's so much in this, and I think the problem is that the trust in police and public institutions really isn't there. It hasn't been there for a long time with the police. We know the Metropolitan Police has had the most criticism over so many things. We know there are various other police forces to do with Southport, to do with Axel Radicubana, to do with all sorts of issues that they have been criticised, and that we haven't been told the full truth. Now we get a situation where we're told initially a 26-year-old white man was arrested, then he was let go and is no longer part of the investigation. Now we know a 28-year-old man is in custody, white British man, and we are told that, and I welcome that. I welcome the fact that the College of Policing has recommended that for serious crimes, when there's significant public interest, that we are told the ethnicity of the alleged perpetrator or someone who is arrested. I think that's a good thing. I think it's about time we knew that. And the problem is that social media, of course, takes off, and people have all sorts of conspiracy theories, all sorts of opinions from people who perhaps don't know the facts necessarily. It's perfectly logical and perfectly reasonable, I think, to speculate, even, of course, the police telling us not to speculate. I think it's inevitable that people do, especially when something of this high profile happens. Ann Widdecombe, her home was known. In fact, it was just a few days ago that she was on television, and there was a pretty strongly identifying piece of footage that showed where her home was. We can see on the screen there that there are still a heavy police presence around that village of Hayter in Devon. There's also many floral tributes have been there too. The police and forensics looking into exactly what was happening. Footage, I think, is from a couple of days ago, but still it's a crime scene. And many people in touch on, I know it's not as serious an issue, but many people asking me yesterday, for example, about Ann Widdecombe's cat, Aloysius, and I made some inquiries to make sure he was okay. He is, and is being looked after well. We can see on the screen there as well Nigel Farage bringing a wreath, and he appears anyway to have his security staff beside him, and actually the safety of MPs is something that so many people have been discussing. And in Parliament, that is something that the Speaker has talked about as well. He says that all MPs have to have the same level, or at least access to the same level of protection. That's just not the case. The case is that if you are someone like Gavin Williamson, who we spoke to earlier on, for example, you're going to have a higher level of protection because you're Defence Secretary. There are 6 ministers in the Cabinet who have that 24-hour police protection from the very brave officers. I worked with them in both the Home Office and the Northern Ireland Office, who are from the Royalty and Specialist Protection branch of the Metropolitan Police. Also worked with the Police Service of Northern Ireland and their Close Protection Unit as well. Claude is in Richmond and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Claude, you're very welcome to the programme. What do you think of Devon and Cornwall Police and how they have dealt with Ann Widdecombe's murder?
I think the problem starts from the top, and I think for some time there's been growing pressure on Sir Mark Riley, and I think as we see we've got
he's the commissioner, of course, of the Metropolitan Police, yeah, and now they're involved with the counter-terror element of this, yeah.
Yeah, and you have to wonder that with these kind of shortfalls of like media training that is needed for the police force, and the kind of, I think, balancing when media has a curiosity of reporting a story to also balancing the balance of a criminal investigation. I think you wonder if these issues are just showing the greater national issues that the police is having, and of course when it comes to since the Casey review, and the kind of importance of people's safety and security, and when they're looking for accountability and justice.
All of that makes total sense, Claude. Real common sense there. I just wonder what level of information you think we need, because there are things the police know that they are not telling us, and that's okay. I'm pretty relaxed about that. We don't know the name of the suspect, for example. We know a little bit about where he lives, and we've seen footage that the Sun newspaper has obtained and various other things about the suspect. What we don't know is whether he did it or not, and we won't know until he is or indeed is not charged. I mean, do you accept, I suppose, as I do, Claude, that actually sometimes not telling the public things is actually in the interest of justice?
Sometimes, but I think also some people may feel that there is the practice of duty of candour and certain policies to be reviewed and I think oversighted as well, because in some cases it may not be followed in the kind of by the handbook of policy, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. I just wonder, you know, is it right that they said they ruled out, or basically ruled out, for example, a terror link, a political link, and now we're being told actually those things may well have happened?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they said there was a directed target to it. So I was wondering what's the difference between what their definition is to ruling out political driven attack. I think there needs to be a bit of clarity there for the public in regards to what is the difference, because
maybe they don't know right now, Claude, because if they're going through this suspect's, presumably they'll be going through his phone, they'll be going through his computer and stuff. There have been stuff, you know, I've been reading about speculation anyway, about links to political material and so on. We don't know, and nothing's proven just yet. So I suppose you know, again, it's a level of information that has to go out there. I mean, if they come out tomorrow and say actually this was political, that there was a political element of it, they haven't done that yet. But if they do, would you be surprised?
I would say no, not really, because I think politics is a very dangerous world, as we know. You know, we are all right to have our debates of differences when it comes to politics, but some people may not agree. So, of course, on that point of view, I would not be surprised. But I would also say that much condolences to Ann Widdecombe's family, and I'm so sorry for what they're going through at this moment. She was loved by some, and she was dismayed by others. But really, I would say that she really had a wonderful way of freedom of speech, and she was a defender of freedom of speech from my point of view.
Claude, you've spoken really, really well this evening, and you've paid a great tribute to Ann Widdecombe there. A lot of common sense in what Claude has said there. Thank you for it. That's Claude in Richmond there in southwest London. We'll speak to a senior member of Reform UK in just a moment about all of this. Stay with us here on Talk.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Got on a big holiday. Immigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Text costs £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1 PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
We'll talk a bit about Portsmouth Council in a few minutes' time, about them taking down those England flags. Becca's been in touch and says, isn't this the same council that took down wreaths at Christmas on doors? You're absolutely right, Becca. Thank you also to the person who's emailed me through my website, petercardwell.com, to very kindly offer to take Aloysius the cat. There's so much love out there, including on Twitter, for Aloysius, and indeed for Ann Widdecombe. And Gawain Tyler is a governing board member of Reform UK. Gawain, good to talk to you, and thank you for joining me in the programme this evening. We've seen this kind of bizarre evolution of the police's view and lines on this, and I felt that a number of Reform UK figures were treated very badly in the last few days for being told, oh, don't speculate, don't say this, don't say that, when actually now the police have come out and said that they were wrong in the first place to suggest that there wasn't a terror link. We're also told still to this day that there isn't a political reason for Ann Widdecombe's dreadful murder. I wouldn't be surprised if they come out tomorrow or the next day and say, well, actually there is, because they're now saying it's targeted. Well, why was she targeted? There's so many questions that are not being answered and are not being handled particularly well by the police. What's your perspective on this?
Well, I think my perspective is they didn't need to get into such a mess. I've been doing some research into this. 10 years ago, there were over 700 PR officers working for police forces, costing about 40 million. It's going to be a lot more than that now. The policemen themselves are doing the job that they are paid to do, and I'm sure they're doing it well. In fact, they're doing it quite quickly. However, their PR teams and their PR operation is disgraceful. All the police need to say is, we have arrested a man, and I understand why they said a white man, by the way. I think that's a reasonable thing in the current climate. We've arrested a man. He is helping us with our inquiries. We are not closing down any line of inquiry. We will tell you more when we have it.
Yes.
We will not be answering any further questions. Instead, they tried to manipulate the public mood by ruling things out that later, and dare I say, obviously, as soon as they released the guy in Newton Abbot, as soon as they arrested somebody in Yorkshire, we realised that somebody had to travel a 5-hour each way round trip to go and find an a woman in her house in Devon. Oh, come off it. Of course it was premeditated. And that's all Farage said. He didn't speculate on the cause. He just said it was premeditated. And you've got to remember, this isn't some person once heard about in the news. This is a close personal friend. This is somebody we hold very, very dearly, that we've spent a lot of time with, who has been kind to us and been entertaining with us and all the rest of it. And to ask somebody to say nothing about what looks like very weird statements by the police about a close personal friend is asking too much of anybody, let alone a senior political figure.
Let's see again what Lawrence Taylor, who is the Assistant Chief Constable, or Assistant Commissioner, I should say, of the Metropolitan Police, has said today about the terror aspect of this. Let's see what he's said.
Counter-Terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Ann Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack.
So now we're being told it is targeted. When it comes to...
Of course it was.
Yes, yes. And when it comes to the reaction of MPs, and MPs talking about safety, we've had this again from Andy Burnham, the new Prime Minister, from Monday, talking about MPs' safety as well, and former MPs. What level of protection do you think should be afforded to people in those positions? Because there are lots of people who are former politicians. I must say I was really shocked when Ann Widdecombe's, first of all, the information that she had died on Friday, and secondly, later on that afternoon, that she was murdered. I would wonder why anybody would want to murder Ann Widdecombe. It's just horrendous. But then you think, well,
because she had strongly held views, and that, I'm sorry to say that we have created a climate and an environment in this country where holding particular groups of views, what I would say non-zeitgeist views, is held in not just contempt, but there are people on one side of the argument that think people on the other side of the argument are not just wrong, but morally bereft, evil. Holding a firm Christian faith, just holding the tenets of the faith that has sustained this nation for 2,000 years, is now perceived to be evil, bigoted. And you've seen the comments, all these people with hashtags saying be kind. You know, as soon as you see that hashtag, you've got a wrong one.
And we have seen a number of really, really horrible things. We're just not going to repeat them, but there have been some really horrible things that people have said.
But this is normal. The demonisation of people on the right has been diabolical and ongoing. David Lammy saying that the ERG were worse than Nazis, and so on and so forth.
Well, I mean,
this gives...
Zia Youssef called people like Marc Francois a traitor. I mean, is that constructive?
I think the whole tone of the public debate, and what saddens me is, to a certain extent, is we have there's a sort of, well, if you can get away with it, we can get away with it attitude, which I think is terribly sad.
But do you accept that Reform UK is part of that problem,
We all need to look at how we do these things, but I think it isn't edifying. That's all. It's just not edifying. Yeah. But I do think that does play into this thing. And after Charlie Kirk was killed, and the attitudes there were just diabolical. There was, I don't recall anybody on my side of the argument celebrating the murder of Joe Cox. We all thought it was appalling.
Yeah.
All of us. I do not recall a single person on my side of the argument celebrating her death.
It's interesting. I mean, for years, Gawain, you saw one, you saw the other. You were the right-hand man of Nigel Farage. You will be aware of the level of threat and how he has dealt with that over the years. Yep. What do you make of the controversy at the moment in regard to his security, to say nothing of other Reform MPs and figures around him?
I believe he's let people know that he gets upwards of 300 death threats a week. I think that's the number that I've seen. That doesn't surprise me at all. It's been ongoing, and to be honest, he gets an awful lot. But if you're a woman in politics, the threats are worse, far worse, and they are awful. It is a sad aspect of modern life. Let's be honest. Threats have always been there for politicians. People have, when the Duke of Wellington was Prime Minister, his carriage was regularly stoned as he went through London, glass being smashed and all the rest of it. Politics has always been robust just because we were in the battle of ideas. And the idea that there was some golden age where everybody was lovely is, I think, for the birds. However, with the way that information is consumed and disseminated today, it has, I think, coarsened and got worse. Robust debate is a good thing. Ann Widdecombe, famously, in her Oxford Union debate, pointed out the only two people who want to close down free speech are snowflakes and totalitarians. In the end result is the same, a deadening of debate, a silence of ideas. We can't have that, but we do need to consider whether we how we behave ourselves. That's all.
Yes.
I don't think I've been perfect in my life. I've probably said things I shouldn't.
I think we all have, Gawain. Thank you for that, Gawain Totter there, who's on the board of Reform UK. I appreciate you joining us this evening. Some news in the last few minutes. Spain have scored in their semi-final in the World Cup in Dallas. It is now 1-0 Spain against France, and Mikel Oyarzabal, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that, but he has scored anyway, and well done to him, however you pronounce his surname. There was a penalty in the 22nd minute, and Spain are now 1-0 up against France in Dallas. And of course, the second semi-final between England and Argentina is tomorrow. Then I think it's Saturday. For third place is on Saturday, and that will be between the loser of tonight. So currently France and one of England and Argentina, and then of course there is on Sunday at night is the World Cup final. There is some breaking news. I can't just see it just on the screen just at the moment, but it will come up in a second. We are hearing that the Widdecombe suspect may have targeted other Reform UK MPs. That is breaking in the Telegraph newspaper at the moment. At this time of the evening, we often get big stories that are coming in the papers tomorrow, and that is the Telegraph newspaper reporting that the Widdecombe suspect may have targeted other Reform UK MPs. I'll get more information for you in just a second. I'll look at that, and the top team behind the glass will give me more info on that during the break, but that is the headline the Telegraph is running with, so stay with us because in a second we'll talk more about that. We'll also talk to Major General Chip Chapman, who's the former head of counter-terrorism at the Ministry of Defence, about what is happening in regard to the Strait of Hormuz and Trump, and perhaps I'll ask him actually about the terrorism aspect of Ann Widdecombe and MPs as well. I'm sure he has a perspective on that. So much to discuss. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We'll get back to your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in just a minute. We've just got some breaking news from the Telegraph newspaper. The Widdecombe suspect may have targeted other Reform UK MPs. Detectives are exploring several leads, including whether the suspect had scoped out her colleagues as part of an extreme left-wing plot. Counter-terror police are investigating whether the man arrested on suspicion of murdering Ann Widdecombe may have targeted other Reform UK politicians. I want to talk about the international situation with Major General Chip Chapman, who's the former head of counter-terrorism for the Ministry of Defence. Chip, if you don't mind, I wonder if I could just briefly ask you about the Ann Widdecombe investigation, because we just have this breaking news. Are you surprised at all, or is this just part of the general way that counter-terror police will look at all these different angles, including the one that the Telegraph is reporting?
The general way they'd look at it, what I would say is two things at the moment. Firstly, under the Terrorism Act 2000, terrorism is defined by either a political, religious, racial, or ideological intent What also we've heard in the last couple of days is that Acts Preparatory 2 have been part of the thing that Counter-Terrorist Command have been looking at. What that would suggest to me is that the digital forensic work they've done includes exploiting his computers, phones, etc., which have found a cache of documents showing that he had an interest in, let's say, right-wing politicians reform in particular. And that would fall into what we have for the last few years called LACIT, that's left, anarchist and single-issued terrorists. It's also worth saying, though, that there is no crime in law of being a terrorist. If this person is charged, the one they currently have, he will be charged under common law murder, not for being a terrorist.
Yes, and just to give a bit more context to the Telegraph report, counter-terrorism specialists examining a number of digital devices seized from the suspect's home as they seek to establish the level of planning that preceded the attack. Detectives are exploring several leads on the suspect's motive, including whether Miss Widdecombe was the sole target or if the suspect had been scoping out other Reform politicians as part of an extreme left-wing plot, just as Chip was talking about there. Officers do not yet know the motivation for the killing, but are keeping an open mind to the possibility of foreign state involvement and also investigating whether left-wing anarchists and single-issue terrorism, LACIT, as you correctly said there, Chip, was a motivating factor. No doubt there is more to come on this. Just a final question on this, and then I promise we'll return to what we've asked you on about, Chip. How do you think this has been handled so far in terms of the flow of information?
Well, I was away for the first couple of days, so what I would say is that it didn't look very agile and slick from the Devon and Cornwall police. And, one of the things, of course, in policing is that we are looking for the 43 Home Department police forces being sort of amalgamated into fewer regional forces. It seemed to me that their communication strategy was not of the greatest that you'd expect. And I think it's been far more professional when we've had counter-terrorist police involved in it.
Chip, thank you for your instant reaction to that. I really appreciate it. Let's talk about what we have asked you on about, and this the Iran war latest. And in the last sort of half an hour or so, we've heard that there are further attacks on Iran, and also Trump scrapping his plan for the 20% fee on ships in the Strait of Hormuz, backing down on that. His argument was if Iran sought to profit from one of the world's most important shipping routes by charging its own tolls, the US should be compensated. Where do you see this situation at the moment? The US still planning a full blockade, and those attacks have kicked off already?
Well, the MOU came into force on the 17th of June with both of the sides cosplaying victory, really. And this is where we still are, with both sides not willing to concede. This is really part of an additional pressure strategy from the Americans, trying to potentially give a reward to the Iranians in the future, but they're not likely to concede. And again, the key problem here is both sides view that they have the upper hand. The Iranians believe they have the upper hand because the US and the international community will crack under the price of oil going up again, and it probably will continue to go up, and that the markets will be rattled, and we're hurtling towards the midterm elections in America if Trump actually takes any cognizance of that anymore. And the US believe that Iran will crack because their funds will dwindle and their infrastructure will be degraded as the multi-night campaign which we're seeing goes on. It does seem that the Americans at the moment are concentrating, not slowly, but they're concentrating on what we call the A2AD capabilities of the Iranians. That's the anti-access area denial, i.e. most of the assets around the Strait of Hormuz, because that is the issue, apart from, of course, the nuclear issue, which is the reason that they went to war in the first place, which is really being parked under the MOU. And you've got this sort of real tension from an American side, because three of the foundational principles of American foreign policy have been kind of under threat. The first one was free trade, and we had this 20% notion for a day, and then it was rescinded by President Trump, and that's part of the problem with people who say he's got no strategy. The second was freedom of navigation, which of course we had prior to the 28th of February and don't seem to have anymore. And the third one is cooperative security with allies. And again, saying you're going to rescind the 20% sort of tariff that he talked about yesterday, but you expect the Gulf countries to sort of invest in the US economy, maybe a step too far for them, when one of the things that they believe is that their security and economy has been compromised, and the sort of security umbrella that they thought they had forevermore from the Americans is not deemed to be as sacrosanct as they thought.
Perhaps you can give me your perspective on Donald Trump's views on not Iran but Iraq, because he was hosting the Prime Minister of Iraq today. He said, "We love Iraq," shouting to the waving media as Ali al-Zaidi arrived. He said they were very well represented by their new leader, and it's interesting because the US sees Iraq as a key ally in the region, particularly when it comes to the Iran war. What do you make of that? And also Donald Trump is pouring scorn on the Iraq war 20 years ago as well, saying that the wrong country was attacked.
Well, I think that's an interesting one, because one of the things that Iran has tried to do over the last, well, really since the revolution in 1979, is to have this axis of resistance with the proxy forces, mainly with the Shia forces, both in with Hezbollah, the Houthis, and Hamas in Gaza, though they're not a Shia body, and also having a major Shia grouping in Iraq, which could debilitate that country, which indeed it did. It seems that one of the potential outcomes of the first phase of the post-28th of February war this year would be that Iran may be losing its sort of hold with the popular mobilization forces in Iraq. I think that's too early to say that at the moment, and that's probably one of the reasons why Donald Trump was saying what he said today when he met the Iraqi representatives.
I wonder if you agree with Michael Clark, the military analyst, who told Sky News earlier today, America lost this war on the night of the first ceasefire on the 7th of April because they'd achieved all they could achieve with military force. And everything we've seen since is the United States backing away from the positions they took before then. So I think what we're seeing is America's discussion about what the terms of loss will be. Is that a fair analysis, do you think?
It may be going slightly too far. I think what Donald Trump actually said prior to the MOU was that the war needed to end because of the dangers to the global oil supply. In a way, I would say that is a return to one of the fundamental principles, again, of American foreign policy post-45, which is pragmatic realism, i.e. they understood the limitations of their power and therefore could go no further in their campaigning if they're not willing to wield the resources, i.e. a grand war, because no war has ever been concluded successfully just via an air campaign. Now, it doesn't seem to be that they're looking at that. The thing I would look for, actually, is that Donald Trump on Thursday is going to talk again to the American people in the same way that he talked to them on the 1st of April. Now, on the 1st of April, he said to them that Operation Epic Fury had achieved overwhelming success and was nearing its strategic objectives. That, of course, is not the case at the moment. And that seems to me to be the problem they still have. The Americans can be as tactically brilliant as they can be, and they have an overwhelming capability, but turning that into a strategic reality is something different. And in a sense, this is where you come back to the Israeli viewpoint that, for example, the Israeli Defense Force say success is knocking out completely and 100% a nuclear file, whereas Mossad would say success is absolutely regime overthrow. And what we don't know in this part of the phase of the campaign is what the CIA role will be in the future alongside Israel. And I think probably a little bit's been said too much about the Kurds. The Kurds are peripheral, really. They're a pressure point. They're not regime toppling, but they're one of those things to look and see in conjunction with the other pressure points on this bombing campaign, and whether the Israelis join in, and whether the economy of Iran goes absolutely sideways. One of the other things I'd look there for is whether the Iranians reintroduce a internet blackout.
Yeah.
And again, you'll have a sort of potential implosion of the economy at the lowest point.
On the potential level of resistance to that within Iran too, and whether people can actually rise up in any way. On the point of Israel and Lebanon, they're talking, of course, in Rome in this closely linked conflict as well. The Lebanese, of course, want the Israelis to withdraw from southern Lebanon. Do you see more hope there, perhaps, than at least they're talking, whereas the US and Iranians, that process seems to have largely broken down?
No, I don't see any hope for the southern Lebanon at all. And the Israelis withdrawing. The reason for that is, Israel doesn't have any strategic depth. It'll always look to its own vital interests. They are often out with what America would want, which is why you had a bit of a spat between Netanyahu and President Trump. Whether we can get to a condition where America's superiority tactically translates into the strategic level is a kind of wait and see. But the bar for the Iranians is very low. It's regime survival, and they're willing and prepared to kill lots of their own population to preserve the regime. And the RGC are primus inter pares at the moment, I think.
Chip, thank you very much for that comprehensive update, and thank you for reacting to that breaking news as well. I appreciate that. Not all guests like doing that, to be brutally honest, but I really appreciate it. That's Major General Chip Chapman, who's a former Ministry of Defence Head of Counter-Terrorism. With some more breaking news on in relation to Ann Widdecombe's murder, and that is that police are looking into reports of a social media post that apparently celebrated the death of Ann Widdecombe, who was killed in the targeted attack. This is, we think, in relation to Heather Herbert, who's a trans activist. The post, allegedly made by a University of Aberdeen employee who appears to be Heather Herbert, claimed the former MP's killing was good news and that she hoped it was an extremely painful death. And that is the Police Scotland saying that the force is looking into the incident. They said, we received reports on Saturday the 11th of July relating to a post made online. Following further assessment, additional inquiries are being carried out. A spokesman for Aberdeen University said the comments that have been shared are entirely the individual's own and do not represent the views of the University of Aberdeen. We do not condone violence or hateful behaviour in any form. We're cooperating with Police Scotland as they carry out their inquiries and cannot comment further. Now, we have attempted to speak to Heather Herbert. She's been on this station before, and it was certainly that tweet that went out under her name, which was allegedly made by her. We don't know for sure whether it was or not, but certainly it was grossly offensive to many people. But that's an interesting one as well. Should the police actually be talking to her on that? Now, I do not want anybody to put anything on social media about how it was good news that Ann Widdecombe died. It's horrendous, it's dreadful, it's awful news. It's a dreadful time for our country that has happened. And someone hoping it was an extremely painful death. I mean, it's so distasteful. It is just shocking and horrible and evil, I think, that people would say that. Is it actually something the police should get involved with? Or is that free speech? Is that the limit of free speech? I'd be very interested in your perspective on that, actually. 0344 499 1000. And actually, social media is what we're talking about next, because there is an announcement coming from Keir Starmer about a midnight social media curfew for teenagers. We'll be speaking to a mother and indeed her offspring. Stay with us.
crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to The Royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Interesting point from Nat in Tel Aviv, who points out that Heather Herbert is biologically male, so therefore a he rather than a she. Very good point there, and thank you for it. And Alicia definitely not Alicia, Elisa in Chelmsford says you may not go to jail for not paying your licence fee, but you will for not paying the fine you get for not paying your licence fee, which is another very good point. One person says, why does your Iran expert say Iran's funds will dwindle? They will receive support from China and Russia and others for a long time yet. Why are experts so naive? I wouldn't call Chip Chapman naive. Sue says the fact that someone like Ann was targeted is worrying. I would not be surprised if she was just one of many affiliated to Reform UK on a hit list, says Sue. And certainly that is the news being reported by the Telegraph this evening, and the police are looking into reports of social media posts that apparently celebrated the death of Ann Widdecombe, who was killed in a targeted attack, but also that there is another element to this, that they're looking into the suspect who's being held at the moment, the 28-year-old man, and whether his social media, and he may well have targeted other Reform UK people as well. They're looking into all those lines of inquiry, and we will, of course, keep you updated on all of that. Because between now and 10 o'clock. And indeed the football too, which is 1-0 to Spain, and that is I think that's the half-time score now, because I think it's half-time at the moment in that, or coming up to half-time anyway, very, very soon. I want to speak now about social media, and Keir Starmer saying that there will be a midnight social media curfew for some teenagers. Well, Danielle Nichols spoke to us about this before, a friend of the station, of course. Danielle, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Peter?
I'm very well, thank you. And the young man beside you is your son. Hard to believe that you have a 19-year-old son, but Joey is 19 and joins us too. Hi, Joey.
Hi, Peter. You all right?
Yeah, very well. Thanks for joining us. I know you have a 17-year-old, a 12-year-old, and an 8-year-old, so the whole gamut of the ages as well. Maybe I could start with Joey, actually, first, because I can ask you, Joey, you'll be all right. You're now an adult, but, 2 or 3 years ago, essentially your social media would end at midnight under this proposal. What do you make of it, Joey?
Yeah, to be honest, I'm not a fan. I think since they brought it in, since he started speaking about it, I think it's a really silly idea. I think children should be able to make their own decision, even at 16, 17 years of age.
How do you protect kids, though, Joey? Because, I mean, look, kids will do what kids will do, and you're not saying they should have unrestricted access, do you? Should there be some parental controls? I mean, how did it work with you?
It goes down to the education of it. I think you need to teach kids, and I think they need to make their own decisions. I think if they're informed in the right way of why maybe you shouldn't be up so late on your phones and stuff like that, then they're able to make better decisions.
Danielle,
I think by just blocking it out, it's not the best way to do it.
Danielle, what's your perspective on this? And I do appreciate you're taking a break from the football. I know your other half is a very successful footballer, and the fact that you're in the break between Spain and Portugal, I don't think this interview would necessarily have been possible tomorrow night. So I appreciate you doing this. Tell us your perspective on this with your kids.
Yeah, I think everyone's very excited for tomorrow night in this house, that's for sure.
Of course.
Yeah, Well, obviously he's my boy, and we're of the same thinking, really, because I believe that the worst thing you can do, to a kid is tell them that they can't have it. You make something so much more exciting when you say it's not allowed, it's banned, you can't have it. It's got to be about education, because our children need to be safe in the world. I've used this strange analogy just recently, but you don't tell a child that they can't use a slide because it's not safe, they will fall off. Instead, what we do is we have a slide and we do it on a soft ground, so that if they fall off the slide, they hit the soft ground. We also stand by them and we make sure that they're safe. We stand around them. We don't say, slides, no! You might fall, so no slide for you, my friend. Like, it just seems so ridiculous to teach children in this manner of this ban. And I think it honestly takes any kind of pressure off the actual providers, because they should have to accept responsibility for content that is on their services.
It's a very good point.
They shouldn't be watching it anyway.
Joey, what is proposed at the moment essentially says you have different rules for under 16s, you have rules for 16 and 17-year-olds, and then you have rules for 18-year-olds and over. If you're at school or college, is that even practical? I mean, there've got to be loads of ways around this, and you know yourself, Joey, and Danielle and I know too, that if there's some block to these things, like the VPNs, for example, teenagers are industrious people, they'll find ways around it, won't they?
Yeah, exactly. These teenagers that are 16, 17 years old now have grown up with devices. They're smarter than any tech wizards out there, so they're going to find a way around it, and it's just going to come an underground market, and it comes back to that thing with drinking and smoking and stuff. Just because you ban it isn't going to stop kids accessing it, whereas if you teach them, then they can make their own decisions on it.
And I mean, when you teach them and when they're receptive to that, the temptation's always going to be there to look for other stuff, that the kind of things that could be sort of harmful. But I wonder as well how much you spend on social media kind of being informed. I don't imagine, Joey, you've picked up or paid for a newspaper and a newsagents in the last little while. You're going to get your news and your information from your phone, aren't you?
Yeah, exactly. And it sort of blocks kids from doing that, and even that can be not a great thing to do, I think.
And what about
detrimental? Yeah, because you're right, this is the only way that kids are accessing things.
Yeah.
I think it becomes more dangerous. I honestly believe that. I think that as soon as you put these taboos, it's basically a free license to the people who are providing the information to just go, well, they really shouldn't be watching it, they really shouldn't be doing it. That is not an answer in my opinion. And like Joey said, with kids that have been brought up with these devices.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I mean, what do you try and do yourself? And do you feel you understand all the technology, Danielle, and how, there are different ways around it and so on? Is it easy to protect your kids?
I think I'm savvy. I remember when my children were young, I even learnt to play computer games purely for the reason that I wanted to know what games they were playing, what they had access to, how it worked, and also to play with my children.
Because she was terrible, though.
I'm absolutely rubbish, Peter. I'm awful.
What were you bad at? What was the one you were worst at?
Fortnite, probably the one, yeah.
Call of Duty, terrible at that. Absolutely awful. But Peter, I still had fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
It doesn't matter how rubbish you are, does it? I still had fun. But yeah, this idea that we're not really, playing board games with our kids, so I wanted to play computer games with my kids. And the truth is, I when they first got their phones, I would check, not in belittling way, but I would sometimes sit and say, can I look over your shoulder? Because I was always very interested in their algorithm. And I was like, if I saw something I didn't like, I'd say, now come on, Joey. You've had 4 or 5 videos talking about X, Y, Z here. What have you been watching?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean, Peter? You only need 10 minutes looking over a kid's shoulder to know what their algorithm's giving them.
You're absolutely right. I know you have your own YouTube channel yourself. Danielle, tell us about that.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked about that, Peter, because we really want people at Talk to tune in. It's on YouTube and it's called Holding It Together, as in Holden the surname, Holden, It Together. It's on YouTube, type that in. And on the socials, we're Holding It Together Official. But it's just a way of looking at family life. We didn't want to do a glossy, shiny. We wanted to do a warts and all. It's kind of okay to be raw and a little bit edgy and show real family life for us, and hope that that somehow resonated with other people and their families, because we do have quite a big, crazy family and we've got a lot on our plate.
Joey, just before you go, do you talk to your younger siblings about it? Do they seek your advice on what to look at on social media and things like that, or are they just sort of just do it themselves? I mean, with your 8-year-old sibling, for example, are you in a situation where you maybe help your mum and dad a bit?
Yeah, well, obviously it can be a scary place, and like I said before, these kids have grown up with them devices. They're very reliant on them, and it's part of their life. But in terms of what you said with helping them, it definitely, if I see anything on any of the devices that I think is too far or what they shouldn't be watching, then I would definitely step in. But also, I have the confidence in them that they are watching the right things, and that we've provided an environment where they will educate themselves in the right way in how to use it.
Or, Peter, when they come across something frightening, because there's a popular little pink pig who we all know about, and it rhymes with Eppa, and they did there was like a series that went round, and it was quite sinister. I don't know if you have found this, and it was quite sinister what Daddy was doing within this.
Right,
and I remember one of my kids being upset and coming to show me, and I was glad
that they did that.
Me.
Yeah.
And we could talk about it.
Yes.
And because there was a few nightmares after that kind of thing, and that was accidental, and it didn't happen again.
Yes.
But you can't. What you do if your children need to be able to come to you and say, do you know what, Mum, I messed up.
Yeah.
You know, I saw this, it frightened me, or I've got questions about this.
Okay.
They should be able to do that, Peter, because that provides a safe place.
Yes. Danielle, thank you. Spain versus France, they're 1-0 up at the moment. Just before you go, Joey, what is your prediction for tomorrow night?
We're going to win. We're going to win. We're going to bring it home. I think we'll win on Sunday as well. I'm confident. My confidence has grown throughout the tournament, and I have real belief in this England team.
How are you going to celebrate when you do win?
Oh yeah, how? I'm not sure. Just a calm celebration, probably.
I think you'll find a few ways to celebrate. Your dad might have a few tips from his successful career as well. Listen, thank you both very, very much indeed. That is Danielle Nichols, a mother and broadcaster, and her son Joey, with their perspective on all of that. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Should it be banned social media from midnight from 16 and 17-year-olds? Let me know your thoughts on all of that. Lots more as well on the Scottish investigation into a hateful tweet about Ann Widdecombe's death. So much to discuss in the next hour. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. This is the Evening Exchange. I'm Peter Cardwell here right through until 10 o'clock, and I promise you I'll keep you up to date on Spain versus France. It is 1-0 to Spain at the moment. They're just kicking off the second half roundabout now. Loads to discuss politically, of course. Ann Widdecombe's murder investigation, the further detail that's coming out about that. Also, Ed Miliband apparently not going to be the Chancellor. That has been reported by The Times this evening. We'll speak to their chief political correspondent in just a moment. The Hillsborough Law, there's been speeches about that this evening, including from Andy Burnham, the next Prime Minister. We'll also talk about COVID and PPE, £10 billion wasted on all of that. We'll speak about the BBC too. Sally Jones, the former BBC presenter, will join us a bit later this hour. But the main thing, of course, is your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes. So please do get in touch. There's a bit more time in the 9 o'clock hour for those calls. We'll take as many of them as I can. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter and at CardwellPeter on Instagram. You can send me a WhatsApp text message. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note or give me a ring, all using the main number 0344 499 1000. So much to discuss between now and 10 o'clock here on Talk. Also quite a lot on Heather Herbert's post from his Twitter account. There was rejoicing and horrible things in regard to the death of Ann Widdecombe. That is now being investigated by Police Scotland. Becca has said he should be sacked by the university, but the police shouldn't be involved with tweets unless he said something beforehand that could count as incitement. Free speech is for everyone, even how disgusting, says Becca. Sarah says, I'm so angry about Heather Herbert's post, but I now think, what would Anne do? She was all for free speech, but given what's happened, I think there's free speech, there's also human decency. And what I didn't like was Heather Herbert's grave dancing and death wishing on the grave of our national treasure, Anne. It just isn't right. Alex in Cardiff says, enjoyment of death is a total degradation of human values. It is so sad to have no empathy and can't see the death of Ann Widdecombe, a 78-year-old lady. If someone can't see that as wrong, that is just so upsetting. Lots more to discuss on that. One more actually from Phil, who says the police should look into what Heather posted. Some people have been jailed for similar posts, but no matter if she removed the post, she should be instantly sacked by Aberdeen University. Mud sticks. Well, Heather Herbert, biologically a man, of course, so happy to point that out. Thank you to Phil for that. The big political news this evening from the Times newspaper, reported by their political editor Steve Swinford, is that Ed Miliband is apparently now not going to be the Chancellor. The leading candidate for that appears to be Shabana Mahmood, or someone we all haven't thought of yet. Aubrey Allegretti is Chief Political Correspondent of The Times. Tell us about this, Aubrey. Great to see you.
Good evening, Peter. Yeah, I think it's a sign of the sort of paranoia running through senior ranks in the Labour Party that there is a sort of vicious briefing war that is getting increasingly sort of frustrated. And we've heard from three allies close to Andy Burnham who effectively say that they think they have convinced the incoming Prime Minister not to include Ed Miliband in his very senior team in that role of Chancellor. Ed Miliband, they say, is someone who's a sort of lightning rod for criticism, particularly over his stance on no new oil and gas drilling in the North Sea, which Andy Burnham has sort of spoken of in support in the past. And there is, I suppose, deeper than that, a sort of battle for the soul of Andy Burnham that's taking place. And if Ed Miliband is not going to be made Chancellor, that will probably come as great frustration to him. His supporters have said that he obviously has the economic expertise and the heft, having previously worked in the Treasury and been a cabinet minister. He's also been helping Andy Burnham with his sort of transition to government. He was one of the most senior people who called early on for Andy Burnham to become Prime Minister and be allowed to stand to be an MP to make that happen. But it's not clear that the final plan is nailed down yet, and we're being told by sources close to Burnham that effectively nothing is confirmed just yet. But given the incoming Prime Minister is basically going to take office in, I think it's 5 days' time now, it seems that time is running out to convince him that Ed Miliband is the right person to take over from Rachel Reeves.
It was interesting. I was speaking to someone with knowledge of the logistics of Downing Street today who was saying, what if England win the World Cup? Because then Andy Burnham becoming Prime Minister will not be on any of the front pages. It will be all about England winning the World Cup on the Monday and indeed the Tuesday. Presumably a logistical challenge, perhaps, for the Prime Minister to get back. He's hoping to go out to America if England reach the World Cup final as well.
I think there are some quite bitter Labour insiders who think that this was a sort of final act of spite by Keir Starmer to sort of organise it in this way. He obviously gets to choose the point at which he steps down, but it's the Labour NEC that chooses the timetable for his replacement. And it's absolutely the case that if England win the final on Sunday, then there will be very little attention being paid towards Westminster by most members of the public. But of course, Andy Burnham is likely now to take over. We had one MP make a nomination for a rival candidate, Catherine West, which is not to be taken terribly seriously. But there are, I think, lots of Labour MPs who are now realised that this is all nailed on. I was in the chamber in the press gallery earlier to hear Andy Burnham's first speech since he became the MP for Makerfield. It was an incredibly sort of hushed silence from a lot of the Labour benches who I think were really trying to appear very attentive and treating him with the sort of reverence that he will be afforded as of next Monday. But of course, Keir Starmer still has another PMQs to get through tomorrow on Wednesday.
We'll talk about that in a second. Let's hear a little bit of what you heard in the chamber of Andy Burnham talking about that law, that Hillsborough Law, the duty of candour. He has spent a long time campaigning for this. This is what he said in the House of Commons earlier.
Let's finish where I started, that the Liverpool supporters were blamed for harming their own fellow supporters at a football match. That is what was done. That was left to stand for all of those years. These families here tonight had to live with that for all of those years. Imagine what that must have felt like. We have had a situation in this country where people suffer the trauma of the initial bereavement, the incident that took their loved ones away. Then they are re-traumatised by the behaviour of the state. We can't take that hurt away tonight, but we can put decency back at the heart of the British state, and that is what this bill does. And I finish again by praising the Prime Minister for making it happen, and this truly is his legacy. Thank you very much.
What did you make of those exchanges, Aubrey, today?
Well, it's the first time Andy Burnham has obviously sort of spoken publicly in the chamber since being sworn in, and there are some that will say that that is evidence of a kind of lack of scrutiny because, of course, Parliament is going into recess, or at least the Commons is this Thursday.
Yeah, there's been a movement, hasn't there, to change the dates and for him to have at least one Prime Minister's questions before the summer recess, but that's been resisted, hasn't it?
Yeah, the Conservatives were effectively trying to push back the point at which the Commons goes into recess by a couple of days so that Andy Burnham could be scrutinised in Parliament. He's obviously given that speech today in which I think he's trying to set out his sort of values. It was a speech that kind of was based on the Hillsborough Law, but I think he was trying to be quite directional about the sorts of people that he would try to stand up for as the next Labour Prime Minister. He talked about other injustices. He talked about the Grenfell fire victims. He talked about victims of the infected blood scandal and of the sort of nuclear test veterans. So he's trying to sort of position himself as being on the side of the sort of downtrodden, of the underrepresented. Keir Starmer wasn't sort of looking at him for much of the speech. I mean, it's kind of the nature of the way being sat at the dispatch box that it's quite hard to sort of crane your neck to turn around to constantly look at somebody else. But you don't get the sense that it's been that an easier transition. Keir Starmer said today privately in a reception at Number 10 that he would go with good grace. But there are lots of Labour MPs who are loyal to him who've been messaging me today, effectively fuming at the way in which they feel he's been forced out in this manner. And that means that Andy Burnham is going to face some resistance from within the PLP, even within his first few weeks in office.
Have those fuming Starmer loyalists actually nominated Andy Burnham?
Some of them have, because I think they realise that the writing is on the wall and they're seeking to...
Tells you everything you need to know about politics, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's politicians' sort of innate instincts to try and survive.
Yes.
But I think they realised the writing's on the wall, and they did so reluctantly. I just think that they're going to make his job quite hard, and I genuinely have heard some of them say because of the plot against Keir Starmer that they say has been concocted for over a year. They say Andy Burnham is not himself immune from a leadership challenge if he doesn't sort of deliver and live up to the hype, in their words. So there is still quite a sort of underlying, I think, concern in the Labour Party, even if the outward projection is that they are unanimously behind him.
Yeah. Heather Hallett on the COVID inquiry today talking about PPE, £10 billion of PPE equipment that was never used. It goes out of date because it has a shelf life, quite literally. I mean, there are calls in Parliament for some lessons to be learned, or at least an apology to be made. Where do you think this goes, or does it just sort of sit there?
Well, I mean, the biggest criticism that the COVID inquiry has faced is the sort of time that it's taken to get to this point, and also the cost. I mean, there's always going to be a trade-off between an inquiry which is thorough and takes longer and is more expensive, and something that is kind of quicker but risks ultimately not delving as deep as it should do into a lot of the issues during the pandemic. And it's, you know, we're wrapped up now in sort of Westminster intrigue and gossip, but you speak to a lot of scientific experts and they say that the risk of a pandemic is not diminishing, that they're going to become more frequent or more regular. And so lessons do have to be learned. I'm just not entirely sure that it's kind of high up the sort of political radar in Westminster, because MPs are very busy basically dealing with the immediate crises in front of them. And it's not clear that they've learned the lessons about preparedness and the need to invest money, even if it's sort of politically not seen as a particularly salient issue at the time. I fear that if we sort of fast forward to the next pandemic, we'll all be scratching our heads saying, why didn't we learn the lessons after the last one?
Yeah, it's interesting as well that talking about the crises that are there at the moment in front of us, MP security, big thing talked about in the last few days. We had an update from the Assistant Commissioner at the Metropolitan Police, Lawrence Taylor, today. Let's just remind ourselves what he said.
Counter-Terrorism South East are now leading the investigation into the death of Ann Widdecombe. This is due to new information and evidence coming to light following the arrest of a 28-year-old man on Saturday in South Yorkshire. I know there will be lots of questions about what that new information is, but this is a live investigation, so I'm limited on the details that I can give. However, it is clear that this was a targeted attack.
It's interesting how the nature of this has changed, and also some YouGov polling today saying that 64% of British people say that MPs face at least a fair amount of risk to their personal safety. That's up from 53% last month. It's predominantly concentrated among Reform UK voters. 75% of Reform UK voters now believe MPs face a risk to their safety, and that's up 27 points from mid-June. This is a big issue that is continuing to be debated, and Reform UK must be smarting from the fact that they were told previously not to speculate, but so much of what they have said has come true, as we saw from that terror-related clip that we just saw, Aubrey.
Yeah, there is absolutely sort of widespread concern in Westminster about the threats to MP security, but Reform and Nigel Farage particularly say that the threat to them is acute. They're preparing to meet the body which is effectively responsible for the security of public figures, and have compiled a dossier which found that there have been over 1,500 threats to Nigel Farage since February just this year. That equates to 300 a month. They say that those cover death threats, and therefore that the security that he was offered by the Home Office and the parliamentary services wasn't adequate enough to tackle it. This issue is absolutely not going to go away, and there have been long-standing concerns about MPs' safety which go back decades, but of course social media means that it's so much easier for people to be able to issue these threats. Even today I read a story about a then Conservative MP who was threatened at a funeral and told that he would be put in the grave by an agitator who was effectively trying to criticise them over their stance on Gaza. So it feels as though this issue has become so pervasive now. The question is how much it really drives people that have a sort of public-spirited and want to serve in politics for the right reasons away from standing in the first place. There will be many politicians who never basically make the decision to run because they're concerned about their own safety.
I spoke to one of them yesterday. Social media as well, it drives so much of it, and curbs on social media apparently going to be part of Keir Starmer's legacy too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so he's planning to introduce effectively a sort of nighttime curfew for, I think it's 16, 17-year-olds as part of the government's plan to limit social media use for children, or at least those under the age of 18. It's part of attempts by Keir Starmer to secure his legacy. We saw something similar, I think, with Rishi Sunak in those sort of final months of his administration, where he was doing things like introducing the smoking ban. And sometimes politicians get effectively more brave once they have already set out their departure timeline. And I think this can be sort of seen in that vein, in the same way that, in fact, to bring this conversation back to the start, the Hillsborough Law wasn't looking like it would get it over the line by the time Keir Starmer resigned as Prime Minister. But ultimately, concessions were made to bring the families, campaigners and MPs on side. And I think Keir Starmer will be hoping that history judges him more kindly than he was while he was in office.
Just a final point, actually, on the Hillsborough Law. Just tell us about the intelligence aspect of it and the row over that.
It's been a real concern, which I think was reflected predominantly by Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. And there were concerns raised during this process that effectively, if there was no opt-out for the security services, i.e. if MI5, MI6 and GCHQ could not have exemptions where they could effectively deny a request for information, then that could have really significant implications for the UK's relationship with the US and its own intelligence services. I heard from sources who were saying it could compromise the amount of information that, for example, the Pentagon or the CIA or the FBI was sharing with the UK, because once that information was fed into the UK system, it could then fall under the scope of the new duty for public officials to tell the truth in public inquiries. The government's obviously moved on this a little bit. First, the sort of responsibility was going to apply to security services themselves. Then the government acquiesced to campaigners' demands and said that it would apply to all individual officers. There's also now a proactive duty to come forward, i.e. if you haven't necessarily been asked for the information, but you think it is relevant, that will apply as well. And the government also recently broadened which services this would apply to, so it now covers things like counter-terror policing as well. So it's a really wide-ranging law that we probably won't see the full effect of in terms of its implications for the British state as such for years to come.
Yeah, Aubrey, thank you very much. Aubrey Allegretti, their chief political correspondent at The Times. Appreciate his contribution this evening. Ernie's been in touch too and says Labour love banning things. They've banned virtually everything in Wales over the past 25 years. It costs nothing and lets us know that they control us. The few MPs they now have left in Wales are deliberately voting against everything that Plaid Cymru and Reform UK tried to do in Wales, because it's actually good for Wales and they've never wanted that. England are about to find out what it's like to be governed by a Labour government. I think I found out over the past couple of years, Ernie, but thank you for that nonetheless. Deborah says this incident should finally force people to recognise the absolute necessity of proper security for politicians. This government removed 75% of Nigel's protection and now we're living with consequences. It took a private individual, a millionaire who clearly understood the scale of the threat, to step in and provide £5 million. You cannot put a price on someone's life, and the fact that this was even necessary is a damning indictment of those responsible for safeguarding public figures. As for the online trolls who fuel hostility and misinformation, they should face the same level of accountability that Lucy Connolly did. Actions have consequences, and this tragedy makes that painfully clear, says Deborah in Essex. He also says R.I.P. Anne. Alex says, so many bans and more bans. My father got in trouble at school for making a bomb and setting it off in an empty field because he was a scientist. He would be facing years in jail now, but you could buy all the ingredients before. Gary says, regardless of who you think is in the right in the war between the US and Iran, the bottom line is that that only one of those two countries is attacking third-party commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, and it's not the US. So I don't understand why lots of other countries are not turning their guns on Iran to protect their own interests. As for your guest's point about how hard it is to get the upper hand in a conflict or negotiation with Iran, imagine just how harder it would be if Iran ever develops its own nuclear arsenal. Very good point there, Gary. Lots of points to discuss this evening. Spain have scored again. In the 58th minute, Pedro Porro scoring the second goal. It is now 2-0 to Spain versus France. So it looks as if, anyway, that Spain are going to be in the final. Obviously, there's a bit left, a reasonable amount, 25 minutes or so left of the second half. But Spain are 2-0 up against France in that semi-final, the other semi-final tomorrow night, which... I'm a little bit worried about the show tomorrow night, to be honest. I think there are going to be quite a few people whose loyalties do not extend to the evening exchange when England are playing. We will take more of your calls, text, tweets and voice notes after the break. And, of course, just a reminder that the winner of Spain versus France, looking like Spain, will face England in Sunday night's final If England get there, of course. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Here at Talk, we're giving you the chance to win a massive £26,000.
The question is, what would you do with all that money?
I don't know. We've got a wedding.
I would buy a camper van.
Probably just like clothes, yeah.
Not on a big holiday. Emigrate.
So if you fancy getting your hands on £26,000 tax-free, here's all the details you need to enter.
For your chance to win, visit talk.tv/win or text TALK to 8338 by 6 p.m. on the 20th of July 2026. Texts cost £2.50 plus your standard network rate. Or send your name and number by post to Comp 1, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by midnight on the 23rd of July 2026. 18 plus, UK residents only. So for your chance to win, text TALK to 8338 now. This is a network promotion. Full T's and C's at talk.tv/win.
Crown is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royalty from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royalty from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody who's been in touch, including the great message who says, if England beat Argentina, is the poor old taxpayer going to have to fund trips to the World Cup final for both Burnham and Starmer, plus all their hangers-on? Or is Starmer going to get Lord Ali to pay for his farewell engagement in a final devil-may-care act of driving the last nail into his own political coffin? Tell us what you really think, Gary. I do think the Prime Minister will probably go. The arrangements are apparently in place for him to go to the World Cup final in America, if indeed it happens. Where is the actual final? Somewhere in America. Do we know exactly where that is for the final on Sunday? I don't know, I must say, which is hard to believe given my brilliant and in-depth knowledge of football. But the Prime Minister, well, I mean, I sort of expect the Prime Minister to be there, to be honest, although we'd then have to get the red eye back to the United Kingdom to then hand over the power. It would be the MetLife Stadium in the Meadowlands Sport Complex in East Rutherford, New Jersey, near New York City on the 19th of July on Sunday. And just to tell you that Spain and France still 2-0 to Spain. Thanks also to Gary, who says the definition of speculation is forming an opinion without having had complete evidence now at the time when Devon and Cornwall police are warning the police against the public against speculating about the murder of Ann Widdecombe and declaring that there was no reason to believe the motive was political or terror-related. They'd only been investigating for not much more than a day and had the wrong man in custody. So surely if anybody was guilty of speculation around the circumstances of the death of Ms Widdecombe, it was Devon and Cornwall police. A very, very good point from Gary there. We also have an interesting report this evening about the trans activist Heather Herbert. Police are looking into his social media that apparently celebrated the death of Ann Widdecombe, who was killed in a targeted attack. The post, allegedly made by the University of Aberdeen employee, claimed the former MP's killing was good news and that he had hoped it was an extremely painful death. Just absolutely dreadful. But should the police be involved in that? Debbie in Lincolnshire has a view on this and is on the line now. 0344 499 1000, the number she's called. Debbie, what do you make of this? Good evening.
Hi, Beaver. Good evening. What I don't understand is how did Lucy Connolly, which she should not have done what she did, but get basically put down for 31 months, and we've got people that have been, I feel, so vile against who I believe was a national treasure, whether you've got your political persuasions towards her, but how can they get away with this? Do you know the answer?
Well, I mean, in a sense, Heather Herbert hasn't got away with it because he's being, there's now a police investigation into it, but certainly there are things that are a lot more hateful than what Lucy Connolly put on Twitter or social media that people get away with all the time. And the fact is there is two-tier justice here. There's just no doubt about that. Now, I don't like what Lucy Connolly put on social media. I don't think, I don't respect her opinion when it comes to that. Did she deserve to go to prison? No, she didn't. Now, in fairness to Lucy Connolly and in fairness to the judicial process, she did plead guilty, which I don't think she should have done. She says she got very bad advice and she's been interviewed by this station on a number of occasions as a result. But I suppose the wider question is free speech. And if you're inciting, I mean, it's different, obviously, to say a horrible thing such as Ann Widdecombe, let's hope she had an extremely painful death. That's a dreadful, awful thing. What is, in law, worse is to say, I hope someone goes and kills someone. That's incitement. So that, to me, is where the law should be. I don't like this tweet at all. I think it's horrible, and I think Heather Herbert needs to apologise immediately. Whether Heather Herbert should face criminal sanction, whether Lucy Connolly should have faced criminal sanction, I think I think probably no, actually. What do you think, Debbie?
But it's not just this person, Heather Herbert, that said what they've said. It was the chap that was interviewed by Sky News saying she was an old maid. I mean, like, have you ever heard, I'm pretty sure you have, don't speak ill of the dead?
Yeah, of course.
I mean,
of course.
I just think it's disgusting.
Yeah. We just need to have a bit more civility, don't we?
Oh, 100%. You know, she was a good egg. She supported your show. She supported lots of other shows. And like I said, you may not agree with her political sway, but to say stuff like this is just disgusting. I just think it's horrific. And what the hell has our country come to if people feel it's great just to go off and go, yay, I'm glad to see the back of you.
Yeah, it's dreadful.
I think someone said, I hope or hell's waiting for you. And
yeah,
I think it's the same person said, I hope she was tied to a bed.
I mean, there was some really horrible stuff that's there and just ghastly, and it's so hurtful as well, and she will have suffered a lot of that in her life as well. Debbie, listen, thanks for your perspective on that. Ben is in Cornwall. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You've had experience of Devon and Cornwall police yourself, Ben, haven't you?
Hi, yeah, good evening. Unfortunately so, and what's happened has been really triggering for me. Before I begin to share what I'd like to share with you and listeners, I'd just like to make it clear that I don't hate the police. I recognise we absolutely need police officers that are motivated, that are professional, and ideally trusted by the communities that they police, because they claim to police with our consent, but I certainly don't remember ever giving it. Frame this with the fact that Devon and Cornwall Police have recently had their inspection by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, which has got 5 gradings: excellent, good, satisfactory, requires improvement, and inadequate. Devon and Cornwall Police have been rated at excellent at nothing, good at nothing, and everything else falls within the other 3 low areas.
Okay.
They have been rated for their last 2 inspections by HMICFRS as being inadequate at investigating crime and safeguarding adults and children at risk of harm.
Right.
They have not improved in those areas, and we would hope that that would be sort of like primary objectives for police forces, to be better than...
You would imagine so, absolutely. Those are the basics, really, aren't they?
So that sort of frames this. Take into account as well that the Chief Constable, Will Kerr, is still under investigation by the IOPC for rape and other serious sexual offences that he committed in Northern Ireland.
Okay, allegedly, let's just be careful. There's an allegation there, certainly against Will Kerr,
an allegation there,
which he denies. I think I have a feeling that's actually been. I have a feeling that's been dealt with. But let's move on from that, Ben.
Not by the IOPC.
Not by the IOPC. Yeah, okay, I think he was found criminally not liable for those.
The CPS found that there was insufficient evidence.
Insufficient evidence.
Okay.
IOPC
said that they were very distressed by that and that they'll look at themselves hard as to how that happened.
Okay. Tell us what happened to you, Ben.
That frames this, right? So back in August of 2023, I just started in a new job working for a medical technology firm. I'd finished work on the Friday at the end of my first week, received a phone call from my wife who informed me the police had phoned her and said they wanted to do a welfare check on me, which was very odd. Half an hour later, I received a further phone call from my wife who told me that there were multiple police cars outside our house. I was on my way to go and work at a restaurant that evening. Then I said, okay, please pass the phone over to the police, because she was on her way to go and pick up our son. I spoke to the police and they were sort of like, where are you? And I said, well, just on my way to work. And they're like, well, we need to see you face to face. And I said, well, I need to be at work in 10 minutes. I'm absolutely fine. There's no welfare issue, okay? And my wife had to take her phone back, go and pick up our son. I asked the police to call me back on my phone. They didn't. My wife then phoned me back extremely distressed from the car saying, Ben, where have you been today? The police say that you've been at hospital and that you've got a gun and that you're going to kill people. I'm like, and there's multiple police cars flying around Falmouth trying to find you. So my heart stops basically, because I'm thinking there's armed police flying around Falmouth who think I have a gun on me, which I can assure you.
Where did this come from, Ben?
We'll get there.
Okay. We don't have a load of time, Ben, so just keep going.
As quickly as I can. Okay?
Sure.
It's very complex, but I phone 999, tell the police where I am, give them my location. Armed police fly up, men with guns come at me, arrest me, put me in the back of a van in a cage, take me to custody, put me in a cell for 10 hours, interview me, put me back in the cell, release me on no further action at 3 a.m. They tell me that a hoax phone call was made by somebody impersonating me. So as you naturally would, I say, okay, who is this person?
Yeah,
what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Their response to that was, well, the phone call was made from an unregistered phone number and we therefore have no further lines of inquiry. So I get dropped home at 3 a.m. My wife tells me that 8 police officers have been in our house searching through all of our rooms, all of our stuff. I then have to tell her that there's somebody out there, I do not know who, quite clearly means a significant harm, stress out all weekend, go to my new employer on the Monday morning, have to tell them what happens because I think there's potentially a threat to them. I then find out through my own endeavours to figure out what the hell had happened that actually what had happened is that somebody had made threats to kill. He had said that he was on his way home to get his 9mm Glock to go and shoot dead the staff at Falmouth Health Centre for what they did to his mum. The reason they came after me is because this guy has the same first name and date of birth as me. So not only did the police do all of that to me and my family,
yes,
but they left a gunman at large. And also bear in mind that this was 2 months after Valdo Calicane's rampage around Nottingham. You would have thought they might have been a little bit more on the ball.
That's crazy, Ben. That's crazy.
Well, I'll get to this really quickly, but it's tragic as hell, right? And then I was really struggling with PTSD after all that because the police were covering it up. I was getting no
Did they
information.
apologise? Did they compensate you?
They don't care, just like they probably haven't apologised to the guy they wrongfully arrested in the Ann Widdecombe case, wasting 24 hours and the trauma that caused him. But then fast forward to April 27th, 2024, sadly my mum dies, and she, relationships with parents are sometimes challenging. But she was married to a man, my stepdad, with whom I had a very poor relationship, and everybody was aware of this. 4 weeks after my mum died, I'm no longer living in Falmouth because I'm too terrified of the police coming after us again. I get a phone call from my wife at 10 o'clock at night who tells me that 2 police officers have just been to the house in Falmouth, and they tell her that they need to find me urgently because I'm in the process of murdering my stepdad. Of course, I think, what kind of hell is this? Because I have a terrible relationship with my stepdad. He made it so there was no funeral for my mum. I'm written out of the will. So I'm really struggling with how I'm feeling towards him. And then the police are hunting me down for being in the process of murdering him.
You don't want to kill him. You don't want to kill. You may not like him, but you certainly don't want to kill him. This is far away from who you are as a person.
I'm harbouring some pretty strong feelings, but the police are saying they need to find me because they think I'm in the process, literally, of murdering him. So then I write an email to various agencies saying I'm going to have to get rid of my phone, go and live in the woods. The police are going to kill me. As a result of me sending that email, what they established is that the same guy as before had phoned the mental health crisis line, and he had said that he was going to kill his stepdad and act on it that day. The police quite clearly still had his mobile phone number wrongly linked to me from the first incident. So they come after me again and leave him at large again to kill his stepdad. And I don't know if he did or he didn't, but this is still ongoing. It's 3 years in. The police are covering it all up. And from everything I'm hearing about how they're handling the Ann Widdecombe case, it's absolutely no surprise that it's going the way it is.
I mean, that is absolutely jaw-dropping what you've told me, Ben. And are you getting any justice? Have you got any apology, any compensation?
Not. I've been to my MP, I've been to the IOPC, I've been to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, everything. And it's all part of the same system, the same entity. And it might be that they're overwhelmed with the number of complaints because there's an extraordinary amount of dissatisfaction with the police. But it is terrifying when this has happened. They have guns. There are a lot of rogue police officers who do terrible things. And I live my life in absolute fear. I haven't had my address on a database for the last 3 years. I've had to live completely off grid to ensure that they don't do something to me.
Ben, I'm so sorry to hear that has happened to you. Thank you for letting us know that dreadful story and series of events. Just stay on the line because I know the producers want to have a quick word with you as well about just how we can maybe help and maybe put a request in to get some further information on this and maybe help you on that. We'll maybe return to this story at some stage soon as well. Extraordinary phone call from Ben there in terms of his relationship and what sounds like persecution by Devon and Cornwall Police. Now, we don't have their side of the story, we only have what Ben has to say on that, but we're going to reach out to Devon and Cornwall Police and get a statement from them, which I'll hopefully bring you tomorrow night, actually. I think in 21 minutes between now and 10 o'clock, it's unreasonable to expect them to get back to us on this case in that period of time, but we're going to contact them. We're going to contact the IOPC, the Office of the Independent Office of Police Conduct, Inspector of Police Conduct, and we'll see what they have to say about all that, and maybe speak to Ben again as well. Lots in this, my goodness, and it really doesn't fill you with confidence about how Devon and Cornwall Police are dealing with things. And even if you took everything that Ben said and put it aside for one moment, even that inspectorate report about how many things require improvement or are inadequate when it comes to Devon and Cornwall Police, what chance is there for an investigation to go, without a hitch, as it hasn't so far with the Ann Widdecombe case? Very, very concerning. On Debbie's call as well, Ernie's been in touch and says what Debbie is trying to get across is that it's okay for the left to say terrible things on social media, but not okay for the right. Well, in fairness, Police Scotland are having a chat now with Heather Herbert, that trans activist, and they will be contacting him to find out what has or has not been said and what can or cannot be done about it. Lots more to discuss, including the BBC presenter's salary. Sally Jones, the former BBC presenter, will give us her take on that in just a second. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right then, let's talk about BBC salaries. Scott Mills, who has now been sacked by the BBC, was the highest paid BBC star. And actually, I'll tell you what, just before we get into that, I should just clarify from our conversation a minute ago that with Ben, that Will Kerr, who was the Chief Constable of Devon and Cornwall Police, there was insufficient evidence from the Crown Prosecution Service to prosecute him, so he is not guilty in law of what he was accused of. Now, I know there's an IOPC investigation into that. That's something that often happens and is often the case, but I'm very happy to clarify that point. Scott Mills, highest paid BBC star before his sacking. He was given around £750,000 before his exit in March, where it emerged he had been accused of historical sexual offences. He cooperated with the police investigation and was not charged. Other top earners include the DJ Greg James, Stephen Nolan, who is a BBC Northern Ireland journalist. Laura Koonsberg earns £400,000 a year. Vernon Kay, Alan Shearer. Interestingly as well, of course, Gary Lineker not on that list anymore because he's no longer with the BBC, quite rightly, if you ask me. Lots to discuss actually on this, because it's not so much the salaries, although they are very high, of course. And I mean, Gabby Logan, £290,000, Kelly Cates, £215,000, and Mark Chapman, £335,000. Those are the sort of three different presenters of Match of the Day, and all three of them together get less than Lineker's 1.3 million. But the thing I find most interesting is actually about the number of people not paying their licence fee and deciding not to pay their licence fee, down 500,000 this year. Let's get the perspective of Sally Jones, former BBC presenter. Sally, maybe we can start on the salaries. What do you make of the fact that the total has reduced, but there's still people getting paid a heck of a lot of money? I mean, do you believe that Zoe Ball was worth 950 quid in her final full, £950,000 in her final full year in the job?
Not for a moment. I mean, Zoe Ball's a perfectly good presenter. Many of them are perfectly good presenters. You look at everybody, sort of Naga Munchetti, the three Match of the Day presenters. You look at Scott Mills. I mean, perfectly safe pair of hands. When he was broadcasting, he was popular. But 745,000 for that man, and that's our money. It's not owned by the BBC. That's out of our licence fee that we pay. And he wouldn't, I don't believe, in any of the independent television comparable channels or doing a comparable job, get a fraction of that. I don't think for a moment Naga Munchetti would get 300 or 400 or whatever it is she's getting. It beggars belief.
What do you think?
After the series of scandals and things like, for example, Gary Lineker, as you were mentioning, getting paid this enormous 1.3 or whatever it was.
1.3 million, yeah.
Yeah, 1.3 million. Well, nice Jack the Lad, jolly presenter, but he just couldn't keep himself off Twitter and Facebook and everything else.
Yeah. And retweeting anti-Semitic memes. What do you think is fair? Because Justin Webb, who is a BBC presenter who I really respect, I think he's very good. I think he does a good job on the Today programme, which I listen to every now and again. But he is their highest paid presenter, £375,000 a year for hosting the Today programme and Americast. I mean, what is a fair salary, do you think, for someone like Justin Webb?
I don't think there's such a thing as a fair salary. I think you've got to look at what the market would be elsewhere. And I don't think that Justin Webb would be getting a whole lot more elsewhere. I think you've got to look, first of all, at the value they bring when you are actually looking at what you're going to offer them. Obviously, somebody like him is an extremely experienced, knowledgeable, he's a safe pair of hands. The viewers like him. He's, I believe, a delightful person. I've always found him delightful. And he absolutely engenders trust in the viewer. And I think that that's one of those great things, that if the viewer likes somebody and can be sort of, and they're actually producing hundreds of thousands of people who will specifically turn on to watch them, I think that that's one of the big reasons for giving them a decent salary, but I don't think anyone is worth 400,000 or 500,000, or certainly not 745. And basic, pretty much daytime TV presenters like Munchetti and the various breakfast time presenters.
Yes.
I just do not see the rationale for them, because they can do a perfectly good job. They're not the greatest brains in the Western world, most of them. I mean, I would exempt Justin Webb from that and some of the really top news people. And I would also exempt those that don't let their bias show, because many of those people have let their bias show, as we saw when Emily Maitlis was in place, when Gary Lineker was in place. They literally tweeted or ranted or simply put their own point of view over the whole time. You really want people who know when to hang up the bias with their coat on the way in, as we were always taught to do. And I was so proud to be in the BBC.
Yeah, me too.
It saddens me hugely.
And I know both of us will have worked very hard to keep our views at the door, which isn't my job now, but was my job then. What do you make of the fact that the highest paid journalist in the BBC is someone who's very well known in Northern Ireland? Stephen Nolan is probably known to the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland, but he gets paid upwards of £425,000 a year, yet he's almost unknown in mainland Britain. What do you make of that?
Well, he's a deeply obscure figure. When I heard the name, I just had to look him up, because Stephen Nolan, who on earth is that? And obviously he's evidently doing a very good job in Northern Ireland, but apart from the odd appearance in the rest of the country, it's it beggars belief. I mean, why? Particularly if your main patch is Northern Ireland, it's pretty much a region. It beggars belief that they are thinking of paying that. And I think that particularly now that I think that even the legal costs of the Trump case, whether or not they win or lose against Trump, or whether it's settled out of court, even the legal costs that the BBC will incur on that are going to dwarf, most of the salaries put together. And if only those making the programmes in which the Trump speech was spliced could have realised that that was biased, that they may have thought that that was what Trump thought, that was not what he said.
Well,
and
exactly.
they let themselves in for potentially billions.
It's a very, very good point. And on the, are you surprised that 500,000 people have decided not to pay their licence fee and just say, actually, do you know what, BBC, we're not interested anymore?
I really don't. I'm not at all surprised. I know various people around here who have one or two small properties that they maybe let out. That's part of how they make their living. And when the BBC is saying, OK, on your house, we're going to make you pay the licence fee, and then on a 2-bedroom little flat that's attached to your house, we're also going to make you pay the same licence fee, and then some little 1-bedroom something alongside, they're making them pay it on that. Well, you just get totally hacked off. You think they are coming after me because I'm honest, and so many people are refusing to pay it because they're fed up with the bias. They just haven't the money. I mean, and now that the licence fee has gone up to £180, that's a substantial chunk. And even for older people who are on benefits who are not having to pay that, there are plenty of older people who now are having to pay that. And it's colossal, and you can see why people take a chance that the detector vans won't end up at their door. And actually, the chances of the detector vans actually being able to come in and catch them in the act of watching it means that they must be spending a fortune in trying to detect people who are watching illegally, not having paid a licence fee.
Yes.
And then, all that money is going into trying to convict them, and then very often they will not pay the fine, and just sort of just keep going away from it.
Indeed. Yeah.
The other thing that really amazed me was when Lisa Nandy is now considering, or has said, that anyone who watches a Netflix or an Apple or an Amazon Prime show should also be paying the BBC licence fee, simply because one or two people that worked on that show may possibly have learned their trade at the BBC.
Yeah, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. I mean,
that's a nonsense. Yeah. Just because you might once have worked somewhere else, does that really mean that you can then the BBC can exact a sort of state-sponsored tithe.
Well,
just
it strikes me as grasping at straws. Listen, thank you, Sally. I really appreciate that. That's Sally Jones, former BBC presenter herself. Appreciate that. Lots to discuss on all of this. What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Is facing its gravest test in decades, and the royal tea from Talk is your front row seat. With royal reputations under pressure and probing questions about public trust, we unpack every twist and revelation with the biggest names in the business. From the throne room at Buckingham Palace to a mansion in Montecito, we follow every royal ripple. Never miss a moment of The Crown in crisis. Subscribe to the royal tea from Talk on the app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Right, wait to hear this, okay? Listen to this. On Sunday night, World Cup final, the halftime, usually 15 minutes, it's going to be 30 minutes in America. FIFA is to break the rules with a 30-minute half-time show at the World Cup final. The BBC and ITV are bracing for a long interval to accommodate performances by Madonna, Shakira and BTS at New Jersey's MetLife Stadium. Has the commercialisation of football finally reached its peak? I mean, this is just ridiculous. We're already delayed by these 2 hydration breaks in every match. Just to say, by the way, that Spain and France still ongoing. They're in a few minutes of stoppage time. Spain 2-0 up against France. Tomorrow night, of course, it is the semi-final between England and Argentina in Dallas. And thank you to Carol, who says, in Liverpool, who says, although I'm a football fan, I will not be watching tomorrow. I will watch you instead. If it was a choice between watching you or Liverpool, I'm sorry, Liverpool would win. Carol, I think that's probably all right. And Ray says, I had a boat in Plymouth which was broken into and electrics and the fuel tank were stolen at the local police station. I reported it. I was given a crime number. When my insurance company checked, there was no such number, so the police constable must not have recorded anything. Let's speak to Lisa in Nottingham. She's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Lisa, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter.
Good evening.
Maybe on the wrong track here, but I've just been thinking about what's been going on. So we had Nigel Farage, obviously in the spotlight again because of what Sky News did to his daughter of going to the home and all that business, which I totally don't agree with. And then obviously the devastating news of what happened to Anne, and then the police saying, you know, within the first 24 hours or so that this wasn't politically motivated. And I'm just wondering, has the government already briefed the police obviously not knowing what was going to happen to Anne, but if any major things happened within a certain time period, the first things that would be announced would be it's non-political related, due to Nigel and his party trying to say...
I just don't know. I don't know about you, Lisa. I just don't know why they said that. Why not just say, look, we don't know, it's early, we don't want to set any hairs running, we will tell you what we know and what we decide to tell you when we tell you. And just leave it at that. And by saying not politically motivated, no counter-terror aspect, now they've done a complete 180 on the counter-terror. The politically motivated thing, well, they've said it was a targeted attack. Well, I mean, I suppose there are other reasons why Ann Widdecombe might have been attacked, but her politics was the thing she was known for. So...
Exactly, and that's what makes you, because of what they've said and the way they've said it, instead of saying, we're launching a murder investigation, as of yet, we don't know any further details, as they would normally do so. But because of the way they've done it, now everybody just about is looking at it as a politically motivated murder because of her involvement in politics.
Yeah, very, very interesting thoughts there, Lisa, and thank you for them. That's Lisa in Nottingham there. Thanks to James, who's in Devon, who says we really need to keep sight of the fact that there was a dreadful murder. The police appear to have solved it. Obviously, we don't know, and nobody's been charged yet, James, but I know what you mean. Media handling is not their primary function. Some people will hate the police come what may. I agree with you, James, but we need to get proper information, and the authorities need to tell us the right thing because we need to trust them. And Sue says nobody at the BBC should be paid more than the Prime Minister. I never listen or watch the BBC, but have to pay the protection money to watch Talk Live. It is obscene, says Sue. Thank you for that. What do you make of Petri Hoskin of the BBC, Roy? Are you talking about it in your programme?
Well, it'll definitely be. I am talking about it, yeah, talking about the licensee. I'm talking actually to a programme maker, because the idea that just because if you're watching something on Netflix, that somebody working on that programme was trained by the BBC, that you should now owe Netflix the money. That's what Lisa